Good evening. If you found your way here tonight, maybe your day's been long. Maybe your mind is still racing a little. Or maybe you just need a voice in the quiet. So, breathe. Let the world slow down, just for a while. Tonight, I'll take you deep into a forest where time doesn't move the way it should. Where someone who wanted to disappear found something that had been waiting. This isn't a story to scare you. Not really. It's a soft tale of silence, of memory, of the kind of hunger that lives under roots and breathes with the trees. So, curl up. Let your eyes grow heavy. And if the woods call to you in your dreams tonight, just remember, not everything that's quiet is safe. Chapter 1. Teeth. Magnificent moonlight. The moon was full, round, and glowing red, and the night was as bright as day. Moonlight flooded the earth, bringing a wave of joy and exhilaration. It carried with it the wild call of the tropical night, the soft and feral sound of the wind whispering across the hairs on my arms, the hollow sighs of the stars, the creaking, grinding noise of moonlight spilling across the water. Everything cried out for need. Oh, the chorus, the howling symphony of thousands of hidden voices, the primal scream of need from within. That entity, the silent observer, the cold, brooding being, the one who laughs, the one who dances under the moon, the part of me that is not truly me, the entity that mocks, that sneers, that walks hand in hand with hunger and craving, with need. And now, need had grown fierce, sliding and clicking coldly through my veins. Slow, but sharp. I had been waiting and watching the priest for 5 weeks now. Need had driven me, tormented me, demanded that I find someone, find the next one, find this priest. 3 weeks ago, I knew he was the one, the next one. We both belonged to the dark passenger, him and me. For 3 weeks, I had battled the rising tide within me, the relentless surge of need, like a giant wave crashing against the shore without ever receding, growing stronger and louder with each tick of the clock under the glaring moonlight. But this was also the time to be cautious, a time to make absolutely sure. Not to make sure about the priest. I had known about him for a while. But to make sure that everything would be done properly. Clean, neat, thoroughly packaged and erased. I couldn't afford to get caught. Not now. I had worked too hard, too long to shape this for myself. To protect the precious little happy life I had built. And by now, there was too much joy, too much pleasure to ever stop. That's why I was always careful, always tidy, always prepared well in advance. so that everything would go smoothly. And even when it was ready, I would still spend extra time to be absolutely certain. That was Harry's way. God bless him, my foster father, the perfect, far-sighted cop. Always be sure. Always be careful. Be precise, he would say. And for the past week, I had been sure that everything was as perfect as Harry would want it to be. As perfect as it possibly could. And when I left the station tonight, I knew. Tonight was the night. Tonight would be the night of action. There was something different about tonight. Tonight, it would happen. It had to happen. Just like it had happened before. Just like it would happen again. Tonight, it would happen to the priest. His name was Father Donovan. He taught music to the kids at St. Anthony's Orphanage in Homestead, Florida. The kids adored him. Of course, he adored the kids too. Oh yes, he loved them very much. He had devoted his whole life to them. Learned Creole and Spanish. Learned their music too. All for the kids. Everything he did, every single thing was for the kids. Everything. I watched him tonight, just as I had watched him every other night before. I watched as he paused in front of the orphanage, speaking to a little black girl who had followed him outside. She was very young, no more than 8, her frame much too small for her age. He sat down on the steps, talking to her for about 5 minutes. The girl sat too, bouncing on her heels the whole time. They laughed together. She leaned against him. He brushed her hair with his hand. Then she smiled, reached out a small hand, and rested her head against the priest's body. Father Donovan patted her gently, stood up, and kissed her goodbye. The petite nun nearby laughed and said something to Father Donovan, to which he replied. And then he began walking toward his car. I crouched lower, preparing to strike, and not yet. A janitorial van had parked about 15 feet from the front door. As Father Donovan walked past it, the side door slid open. A man leaned out, a lit cigarette dangling from his mouth, and greeted the priest. Father Donovan leaned against the side of the van, chatting casually with him. Luck. Luck again. Luck was always present on nights like this. I hadn't seen that man there. Not at all. Hadn't even suspected anyone would be around. But surely, he would have seen me, if not for luck. I took a deep, slow breath, exhaled smoothly, coldly, steadily. Just a minor detail. I had not forgotten any other detail. Everything had been prepared meticulously, everything just as it needed to be. It would be fine. Now. Father Donovan resumed walking toward his car. He turned once more, calling something out behind him. The janitor waved from the orphanage doorway, then flicked away his cigarette and disappeared back inside. Gone. Luck. Again. Luck. Father Donovan fumbled for his keys, opened the door, and slid inside. I heard the key turn in the ignition, heard the engine rumble to life. And then, now, I sat up from the back seat and slipped the noose around his neck. A quick, smooth, beautiful motion, the fishing line, tested to hold 50 pounds, snapped tight. He jerked his head slightly in panic and understood everything. "You're mine now," I said, and he froze immediately, perfectly, as if it had been rehearsed, almost as if he could hear the other voice too, the laughing watcher inside me. "Do exactly what I say," I commanded. He gasped, struggling to breathe, his eyes darting to the rearview mirror. My face was already there waiting for him, hidden behind a white silk mask, only the eyes exposed. "Do you understand?" I said. The silk of the mask folded slightly. Bet Father Donovan said nothing, only stared into my eyes. I tightened the noose. "Do you understand?" I repeated, a little softer this time. This time, he nodded. He raised one trembling hand to touch the noose, hesitating, clearly unsure what would happen if he tried to loosen it. His face was already darkening with bruised color. I eased the noose slightly. "Be smart," I said, "and you'll live longer." He sucked in a deep, rattling breath. I could hear the air hissing through his throat, but he stayed perfectly still, making no attempt to flee. Very good. We drove off. Father Donovan followed my instructions without hesitation, without any tricks. We headed south, passed through the city of Florida, and onto Card Sound Road. I could see how uneasy that road made him, but he didn't protest. He didn't try to talk to me. He kept both hands on the wheel, pale and gripping so tightly that the knuckles stood out. That was very good, too. We drove south for another 5 minutes. No sounds accompanied us, except for the hum of the tires, the whisper of the wind, and the full moon conducting its majestic symphony through the blood vessels of my body. As I carefully watched, quietly laughing at the wild rush of nighttime emotions. "Turn here," I finally said. The priest's eyes flicked to mine in the rearview mirror. Panic tried to crawl out from his eyes, down across his face, seeking his mouth to form words. But, "Turn," I commanded again, and he did, abruptly, as if he had been waiting for this moment all along. He turned. The faint, hidden dirt road appeared ahead. You almost had to know it was there to find it. But I knew. I had been here before. The road wound for 2.5 miles, curving 3 times through sawgrass, weaving past trees, skimming alongside a narrow ditch, deep into the marshlands, and finally opening onto a clearing. 50 years ago, someone had built a house here. Most of the structure was still standing. What remained was still spacious. 3 rooms, half a roof, though the place had been abandoned for many years now. Except for the old vegetable garden beside the house, there were signs that the earth had been freshly disturbed not too long ago. "Stop the car," I said, as the headlights lit up the crumbling house. Father Donovan stumbled to obey. Now fear had seized him entirely. Body, limbs, and mind frozen stiff. "Kill the engine," I ordered, and he did. Silence, Some tiny creature chirped from the treetops. The wind whispered through the grass. Then, even that sound faded, swallowed by the deep, gaping silence, so complete it nearly devoured the roaring melody that surged within my hidden self. "Get out," I said. Father Donovan didn't move. His eyes stared at the vegetable garden. There were 7 small mounds of dirt rising from the ground, clearly visible under the moonlight. Freshly turned earth, dark and damp under the glow. Darker still, surely, in Father Donovan's eyes. He remained frozen. I yanked the noose hard. Harder than he thought survivable. Harder than he could have imagined. His back arched against the seat, veins bulging from his forehead, convinced he was about to die. But not yet. Not for a little while longer. I kicked the car door open and dragged him out, letting him feel my strength. He collapsed onto the dusty dirt road, writhing like a wounded snake. The dark passenger laughed with glee, and I played my part. I planted my boot firmly on Father Donovan's chest and held the noose tight. "You have to listen and do exactly what I say," I told him. "You have to." I leaned down, gently loosening the noose. "You should know that," I said. "It's very important." And he listened. His bloodshot eyes filled with pain and tears caught mine in a flash of dreadful understanding, seeing at last what was inevitable. He knew. He realized how important it was to behave. He was beginning to understand. "Now get up," I said. Slowly, painfully slowly, his eyes never leaving mine, Father Donovan got to his feet. We stood there a moment, staring into each other, bound by a shared, unspoken need. Then he trembled violently. He raised a hand halfway to his face, then let it drop limply. "Go inside the house," I said, almost tenderly. Everything inside was ready. Father Donovan glanced down, then back up, trying to meet my gaze but unable to. He turned toward the house, then froze at the sight of the dark mounds in the garden. He wanted to look into my eyes again, but couldn't. Not after seeing that. He started walking toward the house, with me guiding him by the noose around his neck. He walked obediently, head bowed, a meek broken. He climbed the 5 crumbling steps, passed through the narrow path to the front door, and pushed it open. Father Donovan stopped. He did not look up. He did not look at me. "Through the door," I said, with that same soft command. He shivered. "Now, through the door," I repeated. But he couldn't move. I leaned around him, shoved the door open wider, and kicked him inside. He stumbled, straightened up, and froze just over the threshold, his eyes squeezed shut. I closed the door behind us. I had left a flashlight on the floor just inside the entrance. I switched it on. "Look," I whispered. Father Donovan slowly cautiously, opened one eye. His body froze. Time seemed to stop for him. "No," he whispered. "Yes," I replied. "Oh no," he repeated. "Oh yes," I said back. He screamed, "No!" I yanked the noose. The scream cut off midair. His knees buckled, and he collapsed to the floor with a choking sob, clutching his face. "Yes," I said. "Quite a disgusting sight, isn't it?" He squeezed his entire face shut, refusing to look. Not now. Not like this. And I didn't blame him. Truly, it was a hideous sight. I had thought of little else while setting it all up for him. But he had to see it. It was necessary. Not just for me. Not just for the dark passenger. For him. He had to look. And he wouldn't. "Open your eyes, Father Donovan," I commanded. "Please," he whimpered pathetically. His begging scratched at my nerves in a way it shouldn't have. It should have left me cold and detached. But somehow it reached me, the pitiful moan from that rotting pile of flesh. I kicked his legs out from under him. I yanked the noose viciously upward and grabbed the back of his neck with my right hand, slamming his face down onto the dusty, filthy floorboards. A trickle of blood appeared, and it only fueled my anger. "Open your eyes," I ordered. "Open your eyes. Open them now. Look!" I seized his hair and yanked his head back. "Do what I tell you," I said. "Look, or I'll slice your eyelids off." My words were terribly convincing. He obeyed. He looked. I had tried hard to set everything up properly, but you have to work with what you've got. Maybe I couldn't have prepared such a presentation if the children hadn't stayed out in the garden long enough for the bodies to dry out a little. But even so, they were still filthy. I had tried to wipe most of the dirt away, but some of the bodies had been in the ground too long. You could hardly tell where the flesh ended and the earth began. Honestly, you could never really know if you stopped to think about it. Too dirty. 7 victims. 7 tiny bodies. 7 orphan children, half soaked in dirt, laid out on rubber mats, the clean kind, the kind that didn't leak. 7 straight lines across the room, all pointing toward Father Donovan, so he would know he was about to join them. "Hail Mary, full of grace," he began. I yanked the noose hard. "No more of that, Father. Not now. Now is the time for truth. Please," he gasped. "Yes, beg me. That's good. Much better." I jerked the noose again. "You think that's all, Father? 7 bodies? Did they beg too?" He had no words, only a hollow whimper. "Do you think that's all of them, Father? Just 7? You think I found them all? Oh God," he moaned, sweet and broken. "What about other cities, Father? What about Fayetteville? Do you want to talk about Fayetteville?" He let out a strangled sob, not quite a word. "East Orange, Father? What about East Orange? Was it 3 children there? Or did I miss one? Was it 4? Father Donovan tried to scream. There was no space left in his throat for a real scream. But what did escape was raw, pure emotion. It made up for the lack of volume. He collapsed forward, face down. I let him sob and writhe on the floor for a moment before hauling him back up. He could no longer stand on his own. He had no control left. His will had caved in. Drool dripped from his trembling chin. "Please," he said. "I couldn't stop. I just couldn't stop. Please, you have to understand." "I do understand, Father," I said, and there was something different in my voice now. Something that made him freeze, petrified, just hearing it. It was the voice of the dark passenger. "I understand perfectly," I said, stepping closer to him. The sweat on his cheeks had gone cold. "You see," I continued, "I can't stop either." We were so close now, nearly touching. The filth on him suddenly became too much. I yanked the noose, kicked his legs out again. Father Donovan collapsed onto the floor. "But the children?" I said. "I would never do this to children." I pressed my polished boot onto the back of his head, grinding his face into the floor. "Not like you, Father. Never the children. I have to find people like you." "What are you?" Father Donovan whispered. "The beginning," I said, "and the end. Meet your destroyer, Father." I produced the syringe. When the needle pierced his neck, there was some resistance from his tensed muscles, but not from him. I pushed the plunger down, emptying the syringe. He slipped into a clean, quick piece. A few moments later, his head began to loll to the side, turning toward me. Was he truly seeing me now? Was he seeing the rubber gloves, the carefully zipped up coat, the silk mask? Was he really seeing me? Or was he seeing something else entirely? In another room, the dark passenger's room, the clean room. 2 nights ago, it had been painted white, scrubbed, mopped, scoured as spotless as possible. In the center of that room, where the windows were sealed shut with thick strips of white rubber tape, under the glare of overhead lights, was he finally seeing me there? Seeing me at the table I had prepared, with the white garbage bags, the chemical bottles, the neat little row of saws and knives? Was he seeing me at last? Or was he seeing the 7 grimy corpses, wondering how many more there might be? Was he imagining himself, silent, unable to scream, slowly turning into a pile of bones out there in the garden? Of course not. His imagination would never allow him to see himself as one of them. And in a way, he was right. He would never be reduced to a pitiful heap of bones like the children had been. I would never let that happen. I wasn't like Father Donovan. I wasn't that kind of monster. I was a very neat monster. Neatness took time, of course, but it was worth it to keep the dark passenger pleased, quiet for a long while. Worth it to do what needed to be done, properly, cleanly, to remove another piece of trash from the world. A few more tightly packed garbage bags, and my little corner of the earth would be a cleaner, happier place, a better place. I had about 8 hours before I had to disappear, and I would need every minute of it to do things right. I secured the priest tightly to the table with duct tape and cut away all his clothing. I moved through the preliminary work quickly, shaving, cleaning, trimming anything sticking out untidily. As always, I felt the familiar surge beginning deep inside, a growing hum of excitement buzzing through my body. It would shimmer along my skin while I worked, rising higher and higher until, at the final moment, when the need and the priest both washed away with the receding tide, there was no fear left there now. Sometimes it happened this way. He looked straight at me, his lips moving. "What?" I said, leaning closer. "I can't hear you." I heard his breath, a slow, steady exhale, and then he spoke again, right before his eyes fluttered closed. "At your service," I said softly, and then I got to work. Chapter 2. At 4:30 in the morning, the priest was completely cleaned up. I felt much better. I always did after finishing. Killing always brought me a sense of release. It untangled the snarled threads of Dexter's dark, precious designs. A sweet relief, but necessary venting for all the tiny hydraulic valves inside me. I liked what I did. Sorry if that makes you uncomfortable. Oh, truly sorry. But that's just the way it is. Of course, it couldn't be just any killing. It had to be done the right way, at the right time, to the right person. Very complicated, but very necessary, and always exhausting in its own way. So yes, I was tired, but the pressure of the past week had lifted. The cold voice of the dark passenger was silent. I could be myself again. Dexter, the charming fraud. Dexter, the quietly depressed, falsely humorous man. No longer Dexter with the knife. Dexter the Avenger. Until the next time, I buried all the bodies again out in the garden, adding the priest as a new resident, and cleaned up the inside of the crumbling house as best as possible. I packed up my things into the priest's car and drove south toward the canal where I had hidden my boat. A 17-foot whaler, shallow bottom, with a powerful engine. I pushed the priest's car into the canal behind my boat and climbed aboard. I watched as the car slowly sank and vanished beneath the water. Then I steered the boat back around, out of the canal, heading north across the bay. The sun was just coming up, spilling soft gold across the world. I put on my happiest fisherman's face, just another early morning angler heading home. Anyone want some fresh snapper? By 6:30, I was home, settled into my apartment in Coconut Grove. I pulled a glass slide from my jacket pocket, a simple, clean little slide, with a single drop of the priest's blood carefully preserved in the center. Beautiful, pure, and now fully dry, ready to slide under my microscope whenever I wanted to reminisce. I placed it with the others, 36 neat drops, carefully preserved. I took a longer than usual shower, letting the warm water wash away the final tension, soothe my aching muscles, erase the last clinging traces of the priest and that garden behind the lonely house near the swamp. Children. I should have killed him twice. Whatever made me had left me hollow inside, empty of feeling. And that was fine. I was sure most people faked their way through everyday relationships anyway. I simply faked everything. I was very good at it. Emotions had never lived in me. But I liked children. I would never have children of my own. Sex just seemed grotesque. Imagine actually doing that. How could you? Where's your dignity? But children were special. Father Donovan deserved to die. Harry's code had been satisfied. The dark passenger was at peace. At 7:15, I felt clean again. I drank coffee, ate a bran muffin, and headed to work. The building where I worked was a sleek, modern structure. Bright white, heavy with glass, located near the airport. My lab was on the second floor, in the back. I had a small office adjoining the blood spatter lab. Not quite a real office, but it was mine. A small, private space no one could enter, no one could share, no one could clutter. One desk, one chair, one extra chair for guests, if they weren't too heavy. A computer, bookshelves, file cabinets, a phone, and an answering machine. The answering machine's light was blinking when I walked in. A message for me, a rare event. For whatever reason, very few people in the world had anything to say to a blood spatter analyst during work hours. One of the few who ever did was Deborah Morgan, my foster sister, a cop, just like her father. The message was from her. I pressed play and heard a burst of Tejano music. Follow. Dexter, please call me as soon as you get in. I'm at a crime scene out on Tamiami Trail at the Cacique Motel. There was a pause. I heard her hand cover the phone as she said something to someone nearby. Then more Mexican music and her voice again. Can you come out here right away? Please, Dex. Then she hung up. I have no real family. Not that I know of. Somewhere out there must be people with similar DNA. Poor souls. But I've never met them. Never tried. And they've never tried to find me. Harry and Doris Morgan had adopted me, Deborah's parents, and raised me. Considering what I turned out to be, I think they did a pretty good job, don't you? Both of them were dead now, which left Deb, the only person in the world who truly cared whether I lived or died. For some reason I could never quite understand, she actually preferred that I lived. And I thought that was nice. If I could feel anything, I would have saved all my feelings for Deb. So, I went. I drove out of the Metro Dade lot, onto the nearby highway, which took me to the area along Tamiami Trail where the Cacique Motel was located. One among hundreds of similar motels. In its own way, the place was a paradise, especially if you were a cockroach. The rows of buildings glittered while simultaneously crumbling away. Neon signs blazed bright atop aging, decaying structures. If you didn't come here at night, there was no point in coming at all, because seeing this place in daylight was like staring down at the fine print of life's fragile, laughable contract with us all. Every major city has a district like this. If a rotting, scabby, leprous dwarf wanted to get it on with a leggy hooker and a teenage runaway, he would come here, rent a room, and have at it. Afterward, he could take his little entourage next door, for a cup of Cuban coffee and a medianoche sandwich. Nobody cared, as long as he paid. Deborah had been spending too much time here lately. That was her opinion, not mine. It seemed to be a good place if you were a cop, wanting to boost your odds of catching someone doing something wrong. Deborah didn't see it that way. Maybe because she worked Vice. A young, attractive woman working Vice around Tamiami Trail usually meant going undercover as bait, standing on the street half naked, trying to lure men willing to pay for a piece of cake. Deborah hated it. She despised prostitution, viewed it solely as a societal problem. She didn't think busting Johns was really fighting crime, and this was something only I knew. She hated anything that emphasized her femininity and good looks. My foster sister wanted to be a cop, but she looked more like a model from a men's magazine spread. As I pulled into the lot between the Cacique Motel and Tito's Cafe Cubano next door, I saw her flaunting herself spectacularly. She wore a skin-tight neon pink top, spandex shorts, black fishnet stockings, and high heels. She looked like she had walked out of a 3D Hollywood store for the world's hottest hookers. A few years ago, someone in Vice had figured out that the hookers on the street were laughing at them. Apparently, the mostly male Vice squad had been picking outfits for their female officers that looked nothing like what real hookers wore. As a result, everyone could spot the new girl carrying a badge and a gun in her handbag. The department finally decided to let the women pick their own undercover outfits. After all, who would know better? Maybe most of them did, but not Deborah. She had never been comfortable in anything but jeans. You should have seen what she wanted to wear to her graduation ceremony. And right now, despite how stunning she looked, Deborah, in that seductive outfit, was the least seductive woman I had ever seen. But she certainly stood out. She was working crowd control, her badge clipped to her pink neon top. She stood out even more than the yellow police tape marking the crime scene, or the 3 patrol cars flashing their lights nearby. That blazing pink shirt was practically a beacon. She was stationed near the edge of the parking lot, keeping the crowd away from the lab techs digging through Tito's Cafe's dumpster. I was very glad I hadn't drawn that assignment. The reek from the dumpster seeped all the way to my car window, a thick stench of stale coffee grounds, rotting fruit, and sour pork. The cop at the entrance, someone I recognized, waved me through. I found a spot and parked. "Deb," I called as I walked toward her. "Nice outfit. Really shows off your figure." "You bastard," she said, her face flushing bright red. A rare sight on a season. "They found another hooker," she said. "At least they think it's a hooker. Hard to tell from what's left." "Third one in 5 months," I said. "5th," she corrected. "2 more up in Broward." She shook her head. "And the geniuses upstairs keep insisting there's no official connection." "Wouldn't want all the extra paperwork," I soothed. Deb bared her teeth at me. "What about some basic police work, huh?" she snapped. "Any idiot could see these murders are connected." She shivered slightly. I stared at her, surprised. Deborah Morgan, daughter of a cop, was not easily rattled by crime scenes. When she was a rookie, and the older officers had tried to haze her, showing her the most gruesome corpses they could find, she hadn't even blinked. She had seen it all, touched it all. But this one had gotten to her. Interesting. This one's different, isn't it? I asked. It's in my turf. Hooker's. My jurisdiction. She jabbed a finger at me. And that means I get to be involved. I get noticed. I get a shot at moving up to homicide. I gave her my happiest smile. Ambition, Deb? Damn straight, she said. I want out of Vice, out of these slutty outfits. I want homicide. Dexter, this could be my ticket. One big breakthrough. She paused. Then she said something truly astonishing. Please help me, Dexter, she said. I really hate this job. Please, Deborah. You said please? Do you have any idea how confusing that is for me? Cut the crap, Dex. But Deborah, seriously. I said cut it. Are you going to help me or not? When she asked like that, with that rare please still lingering in the air, what could I say except, of course, Deb, you know I will. She gave me a fierce look, completely reclaiming the earlier please. I don't know, Dex. I don't know anything about you. Of course I'll help, Deb, I repeated, trying to sound wounded. I put on a flawless act of injured pride as I headed over to the dumpster, where the rest of the lab techs were working. Camilla Fig was crawling around, dusting the garbage bags for fingerprints. She was a small, 35-year-old woman with short hair, who never seemed to react to my charming little jokes. But now, seeing me, she popped up onto her knees, blushed furiously, and stared at me as I walked past without saying a word. She always did that, stared at me, blushed, and stayed silent. Sitting on an upside-down milk crate at the far end of the dumpster was Vince Masuoka, digging through a handful of trash. He was half Japanese, and liked to joke that he had inherited the short half. Or at least he called it a joke. There was always something a little strained about Vince's cheerful, wide-mouthed grin, like he had learned to smile from a picture book. Even when he cracked crude jokes for the benefit of the cops, no one ever got mad, and no one ever laughed either. But that didn't stop him. He always checked all the right boxes of politeness, but it always felt a little fake. Maybe that's why I liked him. Another guy pretending to be human, just like me. Hey, Dexter, Vince said without looking up. What brings you out here? I came to observe real professionals at work in a truly professional environment, I said. Find anything yet? Haha, he said. It sounded like a laugh, but even more fake than his smile. You think you're in Boston or something? He found something, held it up to the light, tilted his head to inspect it. Seriously, why are you here? Why wouldn't I be here, Vince? I asked, feigning irritation. This is a crime scene, isn't it? You work blood spatter, he said, tossing whatever he had found and moving on to the next piece of trash. I know that. He flashed me his brightest fake smile. There's no blood here, Dex. I blinked. What do you mean? No blood inside, outside, or anywhere nearby. No blood at all. Weirdest thing you've ever seen, he said. No blood. I could hear those words echoing in my head, louder each time. No sticky, hot, horrifying, messy blood. Not a drop. Not a smear. No blood. Why hadn't I thought of that? It sounded like a missing piece of something I hadn't even realized was incomplete. I didn't pretend to know what it meant for Dexter and blood. Even thinking about it made my teeth clench. But after all, I had built a career, a field of study, a whole profession around blood. Clearly, something very strange was happening. But somehow, I had a hard time caring. I was still me. And after all, hadn't it been a glorious night of carving up a child killer? But this was different. You okay, Dexter? Vince asked. I'm impressed, I said. How did he do it? Depends. I looked at Vince. He was poking carefully at a clump of coffee grounds with a gloved finger. Depends on what, Vince? On who he is and what he did, he said. Haha, I shook my head. Sometimes you try way too hard to sound mysterious, I said. How did the killer eliminate the blood? Hard to say at this point, he answered. We haven't found any trace yet. The victim's body isn't in ideal condition, so there might not be much to find. That didn't sound nearly as fun. I preferred leaving a neat body behind. No mess, no dripping blood, no chaos. If this guy was just another sloppy butcher, it would mean nothing to me. I breathed a little easier. Where's the body? I asked Vince. He nodded toward a spot about 20 feet away. Over there, he said, with La Huerta. Oh, great, I said. La Huerta's in charge? He flashed his fake grin again. Lucky killer. I glanced over. A small group stood around a neat pile of garbage bags. I don't see it, I said. Right there. The trash bags. Each bag is a piece of the body. He cut up the victim and wrapped each piece like a Christmas present. Ever seen anything like that before? Of course I had. That was exactly how I did it. Chapter 3. There's something strangely soothing about observing a murder scene under the bright, blazing Miami sun. It made even the most grotesque killings seem clean, like a staged performance. Like you were visiting some exotic, edgy section of Disney World. Dahmerland. Come on, open the fridge. Please, show your lunch the containers, set aside just for it. Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer was a serial killer who murdered 17 people between 1978 and 1991. The sight of dismembered corpses never really bothered me. No, not even close. Honestly, it always irritated me a little when a body was messy, when killers had been careless with the liquids inside. That was just unpleasant. Aside from that, it didn't seem much worse than inspecting leftover ribs at a butcher shop. But rookies and crime scene visitors usually had a habit of puking, and for some reason, they did it less often down here. Maybe it was the sun, baking the stench away, cleaning things up, making it all seem Nia. Maybe that's why I loved Miami. Such a clean and tidy city. Today was a beautiful, sweltering Miami day. Anyone wearing a suit was now desperately looking for somewhere to hang it. Unfortunately, there was no such place in this tiny, dusty, grimy parking lot. Just a handful of cars and a dumpster shoved into the corner next to Tito's Cafe, resting against a pink stucco wall topped with barbed wire. There was the cafe's back door. A young woman with a perpetually sour face hustled in and out, serving Cuban coffee and rice fritters to the assembled cops and lab techs. A handful of uniformed officers lingered at the crime scene, either to be seen, to exert pressure, or just to make sure they stayed in the loop. Now they had a new job, managing coffee orders, fritters, and sweaty uniforms. The crime scene techs, like me, weren't in uniform. We wore our two-pocket work shirts, much better suited for the job. Mine had a stylish pattern of drummers and palm trees repeated across a sea green background. Very chic, but also very practical. I made my way toward the nearest two-pocket shirt, which belonged to Angel Batista, no relation, as he always introduced himself. Hi, I'm Angel Batista, no relation. He worked for the medical examiner's office and was currently crouched beside one of the trash bags, peering inside. I headed toward him, eager to see what lay inside the bags. Anything that had rattled Deborah was worth checking out. Angel, I said as I approached. What do we have here? We? What do you mean we, white boy? He said. We got no blood here. You're unemployed today. I heard. I squatted down beside him. Was it done here or just dumped? He shook his head. Hard to say. They dump this dumpster twice a week. Those bags could have been sitting here 2 days already. I looked around the lot, then up at the flaking facade of the Kakik Motel. Angel shrugged. They're checking it out, but I doubt they'll find anything. Last few times, the guy just used a regular trash can. Then he grunted. What? I asked. He poked at the trash bag with a pencil. Look at that cut. The end of a severed leg peeked out, pale and lifeless in the sun. It ended neatly at the ankle. The foot had been cleanly sliced off. There was a small butterfly tattoo still visible on the skin, one wing missing where the foot had been. I let out a low whistle. It was almost surgical. This guy had done an excellent job, nearly as good as my own standards. Very clean, I said, and it was. Not just the cut itself. I had never seen dead flesh look so dry, so neat. It was a marvel. Screw your clean, Angel muttered. It ain't over yet. I leaned a little farther, peering deeper into the bag. Nothing was moving inside. Looks pretty over to me, Angel. Look again, he said, opening another bag. This leg here, he chopped it into 4 pieces, almost like he used a ruler. See? But this one, he pointed back at the first leg, he only cut into 2 pieces. How does that make sense? I have no idea, I said. Maybe Detective LaGuerta will figure it out. Angel gave me a long look, both of us struggling to keep straight faces. Maybe she will, he said, turning back to the bags. Why don't you go ask her? Later, Angel, I said. Almost definitely, he muttered, bending back over his work. A few years back, there had been a rumor that Detective Migdia LaGuerta had made it into homicide by sleeping with someone. And looking at her, you might believe it. She had the kind of sharp, haughty beauty that practically sneered at you. A true artist of makeup and fashion. A disciple of Bloomingdale's, a famous upscale department store. But I didn't believe the rumor. Despite her ultra-feminine looks, I had never met a woman with a more masculine mind. She was tough, ruthlessly ambitious, in the most selfish way. Her only real weakness being her fondness for younger, model handsome men. So no, she hadn't needed sex to make it into homicide. She got there by being Cuban, by playing politics, and by perfecting the fine art of sucking up. In Miami, that combo was far more effective than sex. La Guerta was world-class at sucking up. She had kissed enough ass to climb all the way to homicide detective. Unfortunately, it was a job where ass-kissing wasn't much help anymore. She was an absolutely terrible detective. This still happens. The incompetent often get rewarded. But regardless, I still had to work with her. So I used my considerable charm to make her like me. It was much easier than you might think. Anyone can become attractive if they're willing to fake it. To say all the stupid, shallow, nauseating things that conscience prevents most people from uttering. Luckily for me, I had no conscience. So I spoke. As I approached the small group clustered near the cafe, La Guerta was interrogating someone in Spanish, her words firing off like a machine gun. I spoke Spanish and even understood a fair amount of Cuban Spanish, but I could catch maybe one word in 10 when La Guerta was talking. The Cuban accent really is the despair of the Spanish-speaking world. Its sole purpose seemed to be racing against some invisible stopwatch, spitting out as many syllables as possible in 3 seconds without using a single consonant. The trick to keeping up was knowing what the speaker was going to say before they said it. A habit that often fed the cliquishness that non-Cubans sometimes complained about. The man La Guerta was questioning was short, broad, and sun-darkened, with strong indigenous features. He was clearly terrified of her rapid-fire speech, her tone, and her badge. He avoided eye contact, which only made her speak faster. No hay nadie afuera, he said softly, avoiding her gaze. Everyone was inside the cafe. ¿Dónde estabas? She asked. Where were you? The man glanced at the neatly tied trash bags, where the body parts had been found, then quickly looked away. Cocina, he said. In the kitchen. Entonces yo saco la basura. Then I took out the trash. La Guerta pressed harder, battering him with questions, her tone increasingly threatening and accusatory, until the poor man, overwhelmed by the horror of finding human remains, became defensive and uncooperative. A masterful performance. Grab your key witness and turn him against you. If you can screw up a case within the first few hours, it saves lots of time and paperwork later on. She wrapped up the interrogation with a few final threats and dismissed him. Stinking Indian, she muttered, after he was out of earshot. All kinds of people in the world, detective, I said. Even farmers. She turned and slowly raked her eyes over me as I stood there, wondering why. Had she forgotten what I looked like? But eventually, she smiled, full force. She really did like me. Poor fool. Hello, Dexter. What brings you here? I heard you were out here and just had to come. I said, please, detective, when will you marry me? She giggled. The other cops within earshot exchanged glances and looked away. I never buy shoes without trying them on first, LaGuerta said, no matter how pretty they look. While I had no doubt that was true, it didn't quite explain why she was staring at me with her tongue lightly pressed between her teeth. Now go away. You're distracting me. I have serious work to do here. I can see that, I said. Have you caught? She snorted. You sound like a reporter. In another hour, they'll be crawling all over me. What are you going to tell them? She looked over at the trash bags, frowning, not out of any horror at the contents, but clearly thinking about her career, rehearsing the words she'd use at the press conference. It's just a matter of time before the killer slips up and we catch him, she said. In other words, I said, so far he hasn't slipped up. You have no leads, and you have to wait for him to kill again before you can do anything? She gave me a frosty look. I keep forgetting why I like you. I just shrugged. I didn't have any leads either, but then again, neither did she. All we've got is nothing. That Guatemalan guy, she wrinkled her nose toward the man walking away. He found the body parts while taking out the cafe's trash. He didn't recognize the bags, opened one to see if there was anything valuable inside, and found a head. I see, I said quietly. She scanned the area, frowning, as if hoping a clue would just pop out into her hands. That's it. Nobody saw anything. Nobody heard anything. Nothing at all. I have to wait until your computer nerds finish their work before I'll know anything. Detective, a voice called from behind us. Captain Matthews was striding over, drenched in Aramis aftershave, the surest sign that reporters were about to arrive. Good morning, Captain, LaGuerta said. I've assigned Officer Morgan to assist with the peripheral investigation on this case, he said. LaGuerta hesitated. Given her undercover work, she has connections within the prostitution community that could help us navigate some of the difficulties, the captain added, speaking like he was reading from a manual, the product of too many years spent writing reports. Captain, I'm not sure that's necessary, LaGuerta said. The captain smiled, placed a hand on her shoulder. Managing people was a skill. Relax, detective. She won't interfere with your lead on the case. She'll just report to you if she finds anything. Witnesses, information, that sort of thing. Her father was a damn good cop. Understood? His eyes lit up and shifted towards something across the parking lot. I followed his gaze. The Channel 7 news van was rolling in. Excuse me, Matthews said. He straightened his tie, put on his serious face, and marched toward the van. Bitch, LaGuerta muttered. I wasn't sure if she meant it in general or if she was talking about Deb. Either way, it seemed like the perfect time to slip away before LaGuerta remembered that Officer Hooker was my sister. When I got back to Deb, Matthews was already shaking hands with Jerry Gonzalez from Channel 7. Jerry was a pioneer in the if it bleeds, it leads style of reporting that dominated Miami media. A guy cut from the same cloth as me. But this time, he was going to be disappointed. I felt a strange chill crawl across my skin. There was no B. Dexter, Deborah said, still trying to sound tough. though I could tell she was barely containing her excitement. I talked to Captain Matthews. He's letting me work the case. I heard, I said. Be careful. She blinked at me. What the hell are you talking about? LaGuerta, I said. Deborah curled her lip. Her, she spat. Yeah, her. She doesn't like you. She doesn't want you underfoot. Too bad. She got her orders from the captain. Sure, I said. And she's already spent 5 minutes figuring out how to get around them. So just watch your back, Deb. She shrugged. What did you find out? She asked. I shook my head. Nothing yet. LaGuerta's hitting a dead end too. But Vince said... I stopped. Even mentioning it felt too personal. What did Vince say? Just a small detail, Deb. A tiny thing. Who knows if it even means anything? No one will know if you don't talk about it, Dexter. Well, it seems there's no blood left on the body. None at all. Deborah fell silent, thinking for a moment. Not a respectful silence, like mine. Just simple, honest thought. Okay, she finally said. I give up. What does that mean? Too early to say, I replied. But you think it means something. It meant a strange flutter of excitement. It meant that wanting to know more about this killer was going to be a delicious, gnawing obsession. It meant a quiet click of admiration from the dark passenger, who really ought to have been sleeping now, after the adventure with the priest. But how could I explain all that to Deborah? So instead, I just said, maybe, Deb. Who can really know for sure? She shot me a hard look for a second, then shrugged. All right, she said. Anything else? Oh, plenty, I said. The cuts were very clean, almost surgical. Unless they find something at the motel, which no one expects, the victim was killed elsewhere and dumped here. Where? Good question. Half of police work is asking the right questions. And the other half is answering them, she shot back. Exactly. And so far, no one knows where. Deb, I'm sure I won't get the full forensics report. But you're already getting a feeling about it, she said, cutting me off. I looked at her. She looked right back. I had had feelings before. I even had a bit of a reputation for it. My hunches were usually right. Why not? I often knew exactly how killers thought. After all, I thought the same way. Not that I was always right. Sometimes I missed badly. And honestly, that was for the best. I didn't want the cops catching every serial killer out there. Then, what would I have to play with? But now, I needed to decide whether I wanted to dive into this very interesting investigation. Tell me, Dexter, Deborah urged. Have you got any guesses yet? Maybe, I said, but it's still a little early. Well, well, Morgan, LaGuerta's voice rang out behind us. We both turned around. I see you're wearing the perfect uniform for a real officer, she said. There was something in her voice that sounded very much like a slap. Deb stiffened. Detective, she said, have you found anything yet? She asked it with the tone of someone who already knew the answer. A provocation, unnecessary and misaimed. LaGuerta waved a hand dismissively. They're just hookers, she said, glaring at Deb's chest, now even more emphasized in her streetwalker outfit. Just a bunch of street trash. The real goal is keeping the press from going crazy. She shook her head slowly, feigning disbelief, then looked up again. Dot, considering what gravity's already done for you, that should be easy enough, she said. Then she winked at me and sauntered back toward the crime scene perimeter, where Captain Matthews was speaking in full gravitas mode to Jerry Gonzalez from Channel 7. Bitch, Deborah muttered. I'm sorry, Deb. Would you prefer if I said, we'll show her, instead? Or should I say, told you so? She glared at me. God damn it, Dexter, she said. I really want to be the one to catch this guy. And when I thought about the absence of blood, so did I. I really did. Chapter 4. That evening, I took my boat out after work to escape Deborah's questions and to think about what I was feeling. Me feeling. What a strange new concept. I idled my whaler out through the canal, not thinking at all, completely relaxed, gliding slowly past the big houses, each one separated by high hedges and iron fences. I gave a natural, cheerful wave and a bright smile to everyone out on their patios, stretching down to the water. Children were playing on the grass. Parents were grilling, sitting on benches, or tidying fences, all while keeping a watchful eye on their kids. I waved at every one of them. Some waved back. They knew me. They'd seen me before. Always smiling, always waving. He's such a nice young man. So friendly. I can't believe he would do such terrible things. I opened the throttle when I cleared the canal, heading out toward the bay, turning southeast toward the tip of Florida. The salty spray of the water hitting my face sharpened my mind, making me feel wonderfully clear and awake. The peacefulness of the water helped. And in true Miami boating tradition, most of the other boaters seemed to be trying to kill me. I found that relaxing. I was among my own kind. This was my turf. These were my people. The whole day's work had yielded only a few sparse forensic details. By lunchtime, the case had exploded into a nationwide sensation. Public interest zeroed in on the prostitute murders. After the gruesome discovery at the Cacique Motel, Channel 7 had masterfully conveyed the horror of severed body parts dumped in the trash, without bothering to add anything extra. As Detective LaGuerta had wisely pointed out, the victims were just hookers. But once public pressure started, especially fed by the media, they might as well have been the daughters of senators. And so, the police department rolled out its well-rehearsed self-defense strategies, knowing exactly what was coming from the fearless crusaders of the so-called Fifth Estate. The term Fifth Estate, referring here to the press and mass media. Deb stayed at the scene until the captain, worried about too much overtime, sent her home. She called me at 2 p.m. to ask what I had found, which wasn't much. Nothing at the motel itself. Too many tire marks in the parking lot to distinguish anything. No fingerprints or traces in the dumpster, on the trash bags, or on the body parts. Everything was clean, spotless. The biggest forensic clue of the day was the left leg. As Angel had pointed out, the victim's right leg had been neatly sliced into sections at the hip, knee, and ankle, but the left leg was only cut into 2 pieces, wrapped tightly. Thus, Detective LaGuerta, our brilliant lady, came up with her grand theory. Someone must have interrupted the killer, startled him so badly he couldn't finish. He must have panicked when someone saw him, and so she was focusing all her energy on finding that mystery witness. There was just one small problem with LaGuerta's interruption theory. A tiny little flaw, maybe no bigger than half a strand of hair. The entire body had been cleaned and wrapped carefully, likely after dismemberment. It had then been transported and dumped neatly into the dumpster, with no signs of haste, no mistakes, no evidence left behind. Maybe no one had pointed this out to LaGuerta, or, miracle of miracles, maybe no one else had even noticed it. It was possible. Most police work was about routine, fitting facts into familiar patterns. And when a pattern was completely new, the investigation could resemble 3 blind men examining an elephant under a microscope. But because I was neither blind nor burdened by routine thinking, I had a better theory. The killer simply wasn't satisfied. He had all the time he needed. And yet, this was the 5th murder following the same pattern. Maybe simply cutting up bodies had become boring. Maybe our boy was looking for something new. A new direction, a new method, never tried before. I could almost feel his frustration. After going so far, working so hard, wrapping the remains in neat little packages, only to realize, this isn't it. Something's wrong. It's all wasted. The old method no longer brought him any pleasure. He needed a new approach. He was trying to express something, and he hadn't found the right way yet. In my opinion, meaning if I were him, it would drive him crazy. And it meant he was very likely still searching for an answer soon. But for now, let LaGuerta keep hunting for a witness. There wouldn't be one. This was a cold, careful monster, and I was genuinely impressed. What should I do with that admiration? I wasn't sure of the answer, so I retreated to my boat to think. A Donzi cut across my bow at 70 miles an hour, missing me by only a few inches. I waved happily and returned to the moment. I was nearing Stiltsville, the cluster of mostly abandoned houses perched on pilings over the water near the tip of Florida. I circled wide, not heading anywhere specific, letting my mind merge again with the lazy arc of my path. 1 mile equals 1.609 kilometers. 1 inch equals 2.54 centimeters. What should I do? I needed to decide soon, before I became too helpful to Deborah. I could definitely help her solve the case. No one could do it better. There wasn't even anyone else heading the right way, but did I really want to help? Did I want this killer caught? Or, oh, what a dark, wicked little thought. Did I actually want to find him myself? Confront him? And even more, did I want him to stop? What should I do? To my right, I could see Elliot Key catching the last light of the day. As always, it reminded me of camping trips there with Harry Morgan, my foster father, a good cop. You're different, Dexter. Yes, Harry, I certainly am. But you can learn to control it. You can use it for good. Okay, Harry, if you think I should, but how? And he told me, there's no night sky like the night sky over South Florida when you're 14 years old, camping with your father. Even if he's only your foster father. Even if all those stars merely fill you with a strange sense of satisfaction, without emotion. You don't feel it. That's part of why you're there. The campfire had burned down. The stars were too bright, and my beloved foster father had been silent for a long time. Sipping slowly from the old flattened bottle he pulled from his backpack's side pocket. He wasn't much of a drinker. Unlike many cops, Harry didn't drown himself in booze. But now the bottle was empty, and it was time for him to say what he needed to say, if he was going to say it. You're different, Dexter, he said. I tore my gaze from the glittering stars. Around the little sandy clearing, the dying fire cast shadows. Some of them flickered across Harry's face, making him look unfamiliar to me, as if I'd never really seen him before. Resolved, troubled, and a little stunned. What do you mean, Dad? I asked. He didn't look at me. The Billups said Buddy disappeared, he said. The loud little mutt. He barked all night. Mom couldn't sleep because of him. And Mom needed sleep, of course. Dying slowly from cancer required a lot of rest, and she couldn't get it with that damn dog across the street barking every time a leaf fell onto the sidewalk. I found the burial hole, Harry said. There were a lot of bones, Dexter, not just Buddy's. There wasn't much to say. I carefully gathered a handful of pine needles and waited. How long have you been doing this? He asked. I glanced at Harry's face, then looked across the clearing toward the beach. Our boat was out there, rocking gently on the water. The glow of Miami lay far to the right, a soft white halo. I couldn't guess exactly what Harry was after, or what he wanted to hear. But he was a straightforward man. Telling the truth usually worked best with Harry. He would know, or he would find out. 1.5 years, I said. Harry nodded. Why did you start? A very good question. One well beyond my 14 years. I just had to, I said. Even then, it came so smoothly. Do you hear a voice? He wanted to know. Something or someone telling you what to do, and you have to do it? I said, with all the eloquence of a 14-year-old. Not exactly. Tell me about it, Harry said. Oh, the moon. A full, round moon. Something bigger to look at. I grabbed another handful of pine needles. My face burned, as if he were asking me to talk about romantic dreams, which, in a way, it's like, you know, feeling something, I said. Inside, watching me, maybe laughing, but not really a voice, just... I gave a teenager's shrug, but it seemed to make sense to Harry. And this thing, it makes you kill animals. Way up overhead, a bloated jet plane rumbled past slowly. No, it doesn't make me, I said. It's just, it makes it seem like a good idea, I guess. Dot, have you ever wanted to kill something else? Something bigger than a dog? I tried to answer, but something caught in my throat. I cleared it. Yeah, I said. A person? No one in particular, Dad. Just another helpless shrug. Why didn't you? Because I thought you and Mom wouldn't like it. You know, be disappointed. I stole a glance at Harry. He was staring straight at me, unblinking. Is that why we came out here? I asked. To talk about this? Yes, Harry said. We need to arrange things properly for you. Arrange things properly? Yes, the ultimate Harry idea of how to live life, with neat corners and polished shoes. Even then, I knew sometimes killing something was going to have to be part of arranging things properly for me. How? I asked. He looked at me for a long time, seriously, and finally nodded, seeing that I was with him. Good boy, he said. Now, even so, it took a long while before he spoke again. I watched the lights of a small boat slide past, maybe 200 yards offshore. Over the growl of its motor, a radio blared Cuban music. Now, Harry said again, and I turned my gaze back to him. But he was staring away, beyond the dying campfire, into some distant future. It's like this, he said, and I listened carefully. That was how Harry always introduced the deeper truths, the same way he taught me how to throw a curveball or land a left hook. It's like this, he'd say. Always like that. I'm getting older, Dexter. He paused, waiting for me to contradict him, but I didn't. He nodded. I think people understand things differently as they age, he said. It's not about getting softer or seeing things in shades of gray instead of black and white. I really think you just understand things better. He looked at me, Harry's gaze filled with strong love and those blue eyes. Okay, I said. 10 years ago, I would have wanted to lock you up somewhere, he said. I blinked. The words hurt a little, except that I had thought about that possibility myself. But now, he said, I think I understand better. I know what you are, and I know you're a good kid. No, I said softly, but he heard. Yes, he said firmly. You're a good kid, Dex. I know it. I really do. He almost seemed to be speaking to himself, reinforcing the idea. Then he fixed his gaze directly on mine. If you weren't, you wouldn't care what I thought, or what your mom thought. You'd just do whatever you wanted. You wouldn't be able to help yourself. I know that. Because. He paused, just looking at me. I squirmed a little under the weight of it. Do you remember anything, he asked, from before? Before we adopted you? It still hurt, but I honestly didn't know why. I was only 3 years old back then. Nothing at all, I said. Good, he said. No one should remember it. During all the years my foster father was alive, that was all he ever said about it. But even if you don't remember, Dex, he continued, it still affects you. Those things made you what you are now. I talked to some people about it. Strangely enough, he gave me a smile, shy, almost embarrassed. I expected this. What happened to you as a child shaped you. I tried to steer you back, but he shrugged. It was too strong, too deep. It soaked into you too early, and it stayed. It will make you want to kill. and you won't be able to resist. You can't change that. But, he said, and looked away again, staring at something I couldn't guess. You can channel it, control it, choose. His words became very careful, more cautious than I'd ever heard him before. Choose what or who you kill. He gave me another smile, unlike anything I'd ever seen from him before. Cold and dry, like the ashes of our dying campfire. There are plenty of people who deserve it, Dex. And with those few short words, he shaped my entire life. Everything I was, everything I would become. That remarkable man, who saw everything, understood everything. Harry, my father. If I had been capable of love, I would have loved Harry with all my heart. That had been long ago. Harry had been gone for many years, but his lessons lived on. Not because of any warm, misty feelings, but because Harry had been right. I had proved it again and again. Harry knew, and he taught me well. Be careful, Harry had said. He taught me caution with the meticulous care only a cop could teach a killer. Choose very carefully from among those who deserved it. Be absolutely sure. Then clean up afterward. Leave no traces. Never let emotions get involved. They could cause mistakes. Caution mattered more than the killing itself, of course. Caution also meant building a careful life, compartmentalizing everything, blending into society, mimicking the behavior of ordinary people. I had done it all, very carefully. I had become a near-perfect, three-dimensional illusion, beyond suspicion, beyond reproach, beneath contempt. A neat, polite monster, the friendly guy next door. Even Deborah was half fooled, at least half the time. Of course, she also believed what she wanted to believe. Right now, she believed I could help solve these murders, boost her career, and help her swap the hooker costume for a respectable, tailored suit. She was right, of course. I could help her, but I didn't really want to. Because I was fascinated by watching this new killer work. I felt a certain kinship or emotional interference. Ah, there it was. Clearly, I was violating Harry's principle. I turned the boat back toward my canal. It was fully dark now, but I had just passed a radio tower, a few degrees off my homeward heading. Let it be. Harry had always been right. Still was. Don't let emotion get involved, Harry had said. So I wouldn't. I would help Deb. Chapter 5. The next morning, it was raining and the traffic was a mess, just as it always is in Miami when it rains. Some drivers slowed down on the slick streets. That made the others lose their minds, leaning on their horns, sticking their heads out of windows to shout curses, flooring the gas to swerve around, madly overtaking the slower cars and shaking their fists. On the Lejeune ramp, a big milk truck gunned its engine to swerve past and slammed into a school bus full of kids from a Catholic school. The milk truck flipped over. Now 5 little girls in plaid skirts were sitting in a huge puddle of milk with horrified faces. Traffic ground to a halt for nearly an hour. One child had to be airlifted to Jackson Hospital. The others sat in the spilled milk in their uniforms, watching the adults yell at each other. I calmly inched forward, listening to the radio. It sounded like the police were hot on the trail of the Tamiami butcher. Nothing concrete had been released yet, but Captain Matthews gave a wonderfully charming speech. He made listeners feel like he would personally go out and catch the killer right after finishing his cup of coffee. Eventually, I made it to clear roads and sped up a little. I stopped at a donut shop not far from the airport and bought an apple fritter and a cruller. But the apple fritter was nearly gone by the time I got back into my car. I have a very high metabolic rate. It comes with living a healthy life. The rain had stopped when I arrived at work. The sun was coming out, steam rising off the pavement as I walked into the lobby, swiped my badge, and headed upstairs. Deb was waiting for me. This morning, my sister looked less than cheerful. Then again, she hadn't been able to pull off cheerful very often lately. After all, she was a cop, and most of them don't do a very good job of handling stress. Too much time on the job, it leaves a mark on the face. Deb, I said, dropping my crumpled white donut bag onto my desk. Where were you last night? She demanded, her voice irritable, just as I expected. Those lines on her face would soon become permanent, wrecking what was once a near-perfect face. Deep, lively, intelligent blue eyes, a small upturned nose sprinkled with faint freckles, framed by dark hair. Such beautiful features, now caked with thick, cheap makeup. I looked at her fondly. Clearly, Deb had just come off a shift, today dressed in a lacy bra, bright pink spandex shorts, and yellow high heels. Don't worry about me, I said. Where have you been? She blushed. She hated wearing anything besides clean, tight jeans. I tried to call you, she said. Sorry, I replied. Yeah, of course. I sat down in my chair and said nothing. Deb liked to vent at me. Family exists for that kind of thing. So why are you so desperate to talk to me? They're shutting me out, she said, and opened my donut bag, peeking inside. What did you expect? I said. You know what LaGuerta thinks of you. She pulled out the cruller and started devouring it. I expected to be part of this case, she said, mouth full. Just like the captain said. You don't have much tact, I said, or much polish. She wadded up the bag and threw it at my head, missing. God damn it, Dexter, she snapped. You know damn well I deserve to move up to homicide. Instead of... Deb snapped her bra strap and waved at her ridiculous outfit. This goddamn garbage? I nodded. Although you do look good in it, I said. She gave me a terrible look. Anger and disgust wrestling for control of her face. I hate this, she said. I can't do it anymore. If I have to stay in this job much longer, I swear I'll lose my mind. It's still too early for me to get a full read on the case, Deb. God damn it, she said. Whatever else you could say about police work, it was definitely ruining Deborah's vocabulary. She shot me a cold, fierce look, a cop's look. The first time I had ever seen it from my sister. It was Harry's look too, the same blue eyes, the same feeling of seeing right through you to the truth. Don't bullshit me, Dex, she said. Half the time, all you have to do is look at the victim, and you know who did it. I never asked how you can do that, but if you've got any clues on this one, I want them. She kicked the metal leg of my desk hard enough to leave a small dent. God damn it. I need to get out of this goddamn costume. And we're all very eager to see that happen, Morgan. A deep, mock-polite voice said from the doorway behind her. Vince Masuoka was smiling at us. You wouldn't know what to do, Vince, Deb said to him. His smile widened even further. Still that bright, artificial smile straight out of a textbook. Why don't we give it a try and find out? In your dreams, Vince, Debbie said, pouting in a way I hadn't seen since she was 12 years old. Vince jerked his head toward the crumpled white bag on my desk. Your turn, buddy. What did you bring me? Where is it? Sorry, Vince, I said. Debbie ate your cruller. Well, I just wish, he said, flashing a lewd, mocking grin. I could eat her cake instead. You owe me a big donut, Dex. The only big donut you'll ever get to eat, Deborah said. It's not the size of the donut that matters, Vince said to her. It's the skill of the baker. Please, I said. You two are giving me a headache already. It's too early in the morning for this much cleverness. Aha! Vince exclaimed with his awful fake laugh. Ha ha ha! Catch you two later. He winked. And then he strolled off down the hallway toward his microscope. So what have you figured out? Deb asked me. Deb believed I sometimes had lucky hunches. She had reason to believe it. My sharp insights usually came when we were dealing with one of those crazy killers who liked to stab or slash some poor soul every few weeks just for the thrill. More than once, Deborah had seen me casually point a clean finger straight at something no one else had even noticed was there. She never said anything, but as a good cop, she'd been suspicious for a while. She didn't know what was wrong with me, but she knew something was, and sometimes it made her crazy, because after all, she really loved me. The last living creature on Earth who truly loved me. This wasn't some warm, fuzzy self-pity. It was the cold, hard truth. I was someone who couldn't love. Following Harry's plan, I had tried to blend in, tried to form relationships, even at my most foolish, tried to love, but it was impossible. Something inside me was broken or missing, and sooner or later, people would catch me slipping up, or another of those nights would come. I couldn't even keep a pet. Animals hated me. I once bought a dog. It barked and howled at me with non-stop furious rage for 2 whole days before I had to get rid of it. I tried a turtle once. I touched it one time, and afterward, it never came out of its shell again. It died a few days later. Rather than risk seeing me or feeling my touch again, the turtle had chosen death. No one else loved me, or ever would. Not even me. Especially not me. I knew what I was, and it wasn't something lovable. I was completely alone in the world, except for Deborah. And of course, the thing inside me, which didn't really play nice either. It merely needed a counterpart. I cared for Deb the best I could. Dear Deborah, maybe it wasn't love, but I preferred her happy. There she sat, dear Deborah, looking glum. My family, staring at me, unsure what to say, but almost unable to hold it back. Well, I said, actually, I knew it. You do know something. Don't interrupt my train of thought, Deborah. I'm communing with the spirit world. Spit it out. It's the unfinished body part, Deb. The left leg. What about it? LaGuerta thinks the killer was caught off guard, that he panicked and couldn't finish his work. Deborah nodded. Last night, she asked me to check with the street girls, see if anyone saw anything. There must have been a witness. Oh, not you too, I said. Think, Deborah, if he was interrupted, too scared to finish. The wrapping, she burst out. He still had enough time to wrap the body, wipe down everything. She looked stunned. God damn it, after being interrupted, I clapped and smiled at her. Bravo, Miss Marple, it doesn't make sense. On the contrary, if he had plenty of time but didn't complete the ritual properly, and remember, Deb, the ritual is almost everything. What's the logical explanation? For God's sake, why can't you just tell me straight out? She snapped. Where's the fun in that? She exhaled. God damn it. Fine, Dex. If he wasn't interrupted, but he didn't finish, damn it. So maybe the wrapping was more important than the cutting. I gave her a sympathetic look. No, Deb, think. This is the 5th time, exactly like the others. 4 perfectly severed left legs. And now the 5th. I shrugged and raised an eyebrow at her. Oh hell, Jesus Christ, Dexter, how am I supposed to know? Maybe he only needed 4 left legs. Maybe. I don't know. I swear to God. What? I smiled and shook my head. It was so obvious to me. The thrill is gone, Deb. Something simply isn't right. Didn't work. Some essential part of the magic that made it perfect isn't there, and so I'll have to figure that out? Somebody needs to, don't you think? So maybe he paused, searching for inspiration, and found nothing. She frowned. So he stopped. He won't continue? I laughed. Oh God, no, Deb. On the contrary, if you were a preacher and truly believed in God, but couldn't find the right way to worship him, what would you do? Keep trying, she said, until I found the right way. She stared at me. God, is that what you think? He's going to strike again soon? Just a hunch, I said modestly. I could be very wrong, but I was certain I wasn't. We need to catch him in the act, Deb said. Not keep hunting for a witness who doesn't exist. She stood up and headed for the door. I'll call you later. Bye. And she was gone. I looked into the crumpled white paper bag. Nothing left inside. Just like me. A clean, wrinkled exterior. And absolutely nothing inside. I folded the bag neatly and tossed it into the trash can next to my D. I had work to do this morning. Official police lab work. I needed to type up a lengthy report, sort through a batch of photographs, and log in the evidence. It was a routine case, a double homicide that would likely never see trial. But I like to make sure everything I did was meticulously arranged. Besides, the case was genuinely interesting. The blood pattern was incredibly hard to read. Arterial spray. Multiple victims who had obviously moved around during the attack. And stains likely caused by a chainsaw made it nearly impossible to locate the exact point of assault. I had to use 2 full bottles of luminol at $12 a pop to reveal all the faint traces of blood across the scene. In fact, I had to string up lines to help map out the initial spray angles, a technique so old it bordered on alchemy. The blood patterns were spectacular. Wild, fierce, explosive sprays across walls, furniture, television, towels, bed linens, curtains. A savage, astonishing landscape of blood spatters everywhere. Even in Miami, you'd think somebody would have heard something. 2 people were hacked apart alive with a chainsaw in a fancy hotel room, and the neighbors simply turned up their televisions. You might say that your old buddy Dexter got a little too absorbed in his work, but I like to be thorough. I wanted to know where every drop of blood was hiding. The professional reasons were obvious, but for me, not as important as the personal ones. Maybe one day a federal prison psychiatrist would help me understand exactly why. Anyway, the body parts were already cold when we arrived at the scene. We probably weren't ever going to find the guy with the custom-made size 7.5 Italian loafers, right-handed, overweight, and with a vicious left-handed swing. ... But I was diligent and finished my work meticulously. I didn't do my job to catch bad guys. Why would I want that? No, I did my job to create order from chaos, to make sure the nasty bloodstains behaved properly, and then to move on. Other people could use my work to catch criminals, and that was fine with me. But it didn't matter. If I ever got careless enough to get caught, they would call me a monster, a freak, not even human, and they'd gleefully strap me into Old Sparky with self-righteous joy. But if they caught the guy with the size 7.5 loafers, they'd say he was a poor soul who had been led astray by forces beyond his control. He'd serve 10 years tops, and then walk free, with enough settlement money to buy a new suit and a new chainsaw. Every day at work, I understood Harry a little bit better. Chapter 6. Friday night. Date night in Miami. And believe it or not, date night for Dexter. Strange, but I had found someone. What? What? Dexter, the hollowed out corpse of a man, dating new amateur hookers? The dead making love to the dead? Had my need to imitate life gone so far that I was faking orgasms now? Relax. Sex never entered into it. After years of fumbling awkwardness and painfully trying to seem normal, I had finally met the perfect dating candidate. Rita was just as damaged as I was. Married too young, she had struggled to make the marriage work for 10 years. and had 2 children. Her charming husband had a few minor problems. First alcohol, then heroin, and, believe it or not, eventually cocaine. He'd beat her, that brute. Smashed furniture, screamed, threw dishes, made threats. Then he raped her. Passed along a handful of nasty diseases common to cokeheads. It became routine. Rita endured it, worked hard, took him to rehab, twice, and finally, one night when he turned his rage on the children, Rita snapped. By now, of course, her face had healed. Broken arms and ribs were everyday matters for doctors in Miami. Rita looked perfectly presentable now. Just what a monster like me could ask for. The divorce had been finalized. The brute locked away. And then what? The mysteries of the human mind. Somehow, for some reason, sweet Rita decided to try dating again. She was sure it was the right thing to do, but from the trauma of years of abuse at the hands of someone she once loved, she was now completely indifferent to sex. Maybe what she needed was simply a friend, someone of the opposite sex to talk to, spend time with. She searched for the right type, sensitive, gentle, willing to wait. It was a long search, of course. She was looking for an imaginary man who cared more about conversation and movie nights than about getting her into bed, 'cause she just wasn't ready for that. Did I say imaginary? Yes, indeed. Most women knew better after 2 kids and 1 divorce. But poor Rita had married too young and too passionately to have learned that hard lesson. Instead of realizing that all men were animals, she'd created a sweet fantasy of the perfect gentleman, someone who could wait forever while she slowly blossomed like a delicate little flower. There it was. Maybe a man like that had existed once, in Victorian England, where every corner had a brothel where a gentleman could spend his passions before returning to his pure love. But in 21st century Miami, I didn't think so. Still, I could mimic all that perfectly, and I really wanted to. I wasn't interested in a romantic relationship. I wanted camouflage. Rita was exactly what I needed. She, as I mentioned, was quite attractive. Petite, lively, energetic, with the trim body of a track athlete, short blonde hair, and blue eyes. She was a devoted fitness fanatic, spending her free time running, biking, and doing other sports. In fact, sweating together was one of our favorite activities. We'd biked across the Everglades, run 5-kilometer races, even hit the gym together. And better yet, her 2 children. Astor, 8 years old, and Cody, 5. Both unnervingly quiet. Of course they were. Kids growing up in homes where adults constantly tried to kill each other with household furniture tend to retreat inward. Any child raised in that kind of horror would. But eventually, they could be brought back out. Look at me. I'd survived nameless terrors as a child, Yet here I was, a useful citizen, a pillar of the community. Maybe that's part of why I had a strange soft spot for Aster and Cody. Because honestly, I liked them. And that made no sense at all. I knew who I was and understood a lot about myself. But one of the few things I didn't understand was my attitude toward children. I liked them. They mattered to me. They had meaning. I couldn't explain it. I truly wouldn't care if all humanity disappeared tomorrow, except for maybe myself, and Deborah too. Other people mattered less to me than lawn furniture. As psychiatrists like to say, I had no true perception of other people's reality. And it didn't weigh on me. But children, they were different. I had been dating Rita for nearly a year and a half now, during which I had carefully, methodically won over Aster and Cody. I did nothing wrong. I didn't hurt them. I remembered birthdays, school events, vacations. I could be in their home without causing harm. I could be trusted. A deeply ironic truth, but a truth nonetheless. I was the only man those two children could truly trust. Rita thought it was part of the long, patient courtship I was offering her, showing her that her kids liked me, and who knows. But the truth was, the children meant far more to me than she did. It might already be too late, but I didn't want to see them grow up to be like me. That Friday night, Aster was the one who answered the door. She wore an oversized Rugrats t-shirt that fell all the way down to her knees. Her red hair was tied into 2 braids, and her tiny, quiet face showed no expression at all. "Hello, Uncle Dexter," she said in her barely audible voice. For her, 3 words strung together were practically a full conversation. "Good evening, young lady," I said, doing my best Lord Mountbatten impersonation. "May I venture to say you look absolutely lovely tonight." "You can," she said, swinging the door wider open. "He's here," she called into the darkness around the couch. I stepped past her. Cody stood behind his sister, just inside, like backup in case things went wrong. "Cody," I greeted, handing him a pack of Necco wafers. He took the candy without taking his eyes off me, then simply let his arm hang loosely by his side. Not even glancing. He wouldn't open it until after I was gone, at which point he would share it with Astor. "Is that you, Dexter?" Rita called from the other room. "Here," I replied. "Can't you teach these kids some manners?" "No," Cody said quietly. "A joke." I stared at him. What next? Would he someday sing, dance down the street, deliver a keynote speech at the Democratic National Convention? Rita came rushing out, fastening an earring. She looked surprisingly flirtatious. She wore a bright blue silk dress that floated around mid-thigh, and of course, her best New Balance sneakers. I had never seen, or even heard of, a woman wearing running shoes on a date. What a fascinating creature. "Hey there, handsome," Rita said. "Let me just talk to the babysitter." and then we can leave. She disappeared into the kitchen, where I heard her giving instructions to the teenage neighbor girl. Bedtime schedules, homework, TV restrictions, emergency phone numbers, what to do in case of accidental poisoning or bleeding. Meanwhile, Cody and Aster stared silently at me. "Are you and Mommy going to a movie?" Aster asked. I nodded. "If we can find a movie that doesn't make us sick." "Oh," she said, making a slight scowl that gave me a tiny thrill. Success. "Do you really get sick watching movies?" Cody asked. "Cody," Aster said sharply. "Is it true?" Cody insisted. "No," I said, "but I do get queasy sometimes." "Let's go," Rita said, sweeping back into the room and planting a kiss on each child's cheek. "Listen to Alice. Bedtime at 9. You'll come back, right?" Cody asked. "Cody, of course Monty will be back," Rita replied. "I meant Uncle Dexter," Cody said. "You'll be asleep by then," I said, "but I'll wave to you, okay?" "I won't sleep," he said firmly. "Then I'll stop by and we'll play cards," I said. "Real poker. Winner gets to keep the horse." "Dexter," Rita broke in, but she was smiling. "You'll be sleeping, Cody. Goodbye, sweethearts. Be good." She grabbed my hand and pulled me out the door. "Honestly," she murmured, "they absolutely adore you." The movie wasn't anything special. I didn't actually feel like vomiting, but I barely remembered what it was about by the time we stopped for a late drink at a little cafe on South Beach. That was Rita's idea. Though she'd lived in Miami most of her life, she still thought South Beach was glamorous and exciting. Maybe it was the rollerbladers, or maybe it was just that any place packed with stylish jerks seemed irresistible. In any case, we had to wait 20 minutes for a tiny table, then another 20 for service. I didn't mind. I enjoyed watching all the beautiful idiots sizing each other up. A fantastic spectator sport. Afterward, we strolled along Ocean Drive, making small talk, a skill I had mastered perfectly. It was a lovely night. The full moon that had hung fat and round when I dispatched Father Donovan was now missing a slice. Driving back toward Rita's house in South Miami after our thoroughly proper date, we passed through a rougher part of Coconut Grove. A flashing red light caught my eye, and I glanced toward the side of the road. Crime scene. Yellow tape stretched across. Patrol cars spinning their lights. Him again, I thought. Even before I fully understood what I meant by him, I was steering toward the scene. "Where are we going?" Rita asked, quite reasonably. "Oh," I said, "I just want to stop and see if they need me." "Don't you need a pager for that?" I flashed my best Friday night grin. "Sometimes they don't know they need me until I show up," I said. Maybe I would have stopped anyway, just to show off my cover to Rita. That was the whole point of wearing camouflage after all, so others would see it. But really, it was the whispering voice, the insistent tug in my mind that would have made me stop no matter what. Him again, and I needed to see what he was up to. I left Rita in the car and hurried toward the crime scene. The bastard had done it again. Once more, a neat arrangement of body parts, wrapped and displayed. Angel, no relation, was crouched near them, almost exactly like when I had last seen him at the previous scene. Hijo de puta, he muttered as I approached. I'm pretty sure it's not me, I said. The rest of us are complaining that we have to work on a Friday night, Angel said. And here you show up with your date. And still, nothing here for you either. Same killer, same method, identical, he said, flipping back a sheet of plastic with his pen. Bone dry again, he continued. Not a single drop of blood. Those words gave me a slight jolt. I leaned down to look. Once again, the body parts were astonishingly clean and dry. They had a slight bluish tint and looked as if they'd been preserved for a short while. A masterpiece. There's a little difference in the cuts this time, Angel said. In 4 spots, he pointed. Very rough here, almost emotional. Then over here, not so much. And here, intermediate levels. See? Very interesting, I said. And now look at this, he said, nudging a bloodless chunk of flesh aside with his pencil. Beneath it, a bright white patch was exposed. The flesh had been meticulously peeled away along a stretch of the limb, revealing a spotlessly clean bone. Why would he do that? Angel asked quietly. I exhaled. He's experimenting, I said, trying to find the right method. I stared at the neat, dry remains until I realized Angel was staring at me. Like a kid playing with his food was how I described it to Rita when I got back to the car. Oh my God, Rita said. That's horrible. I think the correct word is disgusting, I said. How can you joke about something like that? Dexter. I gave her a reassuring smile. When you do the kind of work I do, you get used to it, I said. We all make jokes to cover up the pain we feel. Oh God, I hope they catch that sick bastard soon. I thought about the neatly wrapped remains, the variety of cuts, and the admirable absence of any blood. Not too soon, I said. What did you say? She asked. I just said I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. The killer is extremely smart, and the detective in charge is more interested in playing politics than solving murders. She looked at me to see if I was joking. ... Then she fell silent for a long moment as we drove south, down US 1. She didn't say another word until we reached South Miami. I don't think I'll ever get used to, I don't know, the underside of things, she finally said. The way things really are, the way you see them. She surprised me. I had been sitting in silence, mentally circling those beautifully arranged, dry body parts, like an eagle scouting for fresh meat. Rita's comment hit me so unexpectedly that, for a long minute, I couldn't even manage a stutter. Finally, I pulled myself together enough to ask, "What do you mean?" She frowned. I'm not sure. It's just, we all assume that everything has a proper way it's supposed to be, right? A way things are supposed to happen. And then, they don't. They're always... She shook her head, searching. Darker, maybe. More human, somehow. Like this. I just figured, of course, a detective would want to catch a killer. Isn't that what detectives do? I never thought politics had anything to do with murder cases. Actually, it's everything, I said, turning into Rita's neighborhood and slowing the car as we approached her neat, unremarkable house. But you, she said, not seeming to realize where we were or what I had just said. That's where you start. Most people never really think that far. I'm not that deep, Rita, I said. I brought the car to a full stop. It's like this. Everything has two sides. The side everyone believes is real, and the side that actually is. You already knew that. For you, it's like a game. I had no idea what she was trying to say. In fact, I decided to give up even trying to figure it out. And as she talked, I let my mind drift back to the latest murder scene. The cleanness of the flesh, the randomness of the cuts, the completely bloodless, pristine remains. Dexter, Rita said, placing a hand on my arm. I kissed her. I don't know which of us was more surprised. It certainly wasn't something I had planned to do. And it definitely wasn't the scent of her perfume. But I pressed my lips against hers and kept them there for a long moment. She pulled away. No, she said. I know, Dexter. Okay, I said, still dazed by what I had just done. I don't think I want to. I'm not ready. Damn it, Dexter, she said. She fumbled with her seatbelt, opened the car door, and ran into her house. Oh God, I thought, what the hell did I just do? I knew I should reflect on it. Maybe feel some disappointment at ruining the camouflage I had spent a year and a half carefully crafting. But all I could think about were the neatly wrapped body parts. No blood, not a single drop. Chapter 7. The body was stretched out just the way I liked it. Arms and legs tightly bound, mouth sealed with duct tape so there'd be no noise, no mess spilling over my workspace. My hand felt perfectly steady, holding the knife. So steady, I was certain this would be a very successful, very satisfying session. Except it wasn't a knife. It was Except it wasn't my hand. Even though my hand moved with this one, it wasn't truly mine holding the blade. The room was very small, very cramped, and somehow that made sense because it was what exactly? Now, here, I was floating above the perfectly cramped workspace, over the enticing body, and for the first time, I felt a coldness swirl around me, even through me. If I could feel my teeth, they would have been chattering. My hand, in perfect unison with that other hand, raised and then plunged the blade in a perfect cut. Of course, I woke up, standing by my front door, completely naked. I could understand sleepwalking, but sleep stripping too? That was new. I staggered back to my little wheeled bed. The blanket was a tangled mess on the floor. The air conditioner had dropped the room to about 60 degrees Fahrenheit. It had seemed like a good idea at the time, feeling the hostile chill of everything after what happened with Rita. Ridiculous, if it had even really happened. Dexter, the bumbling lover boy, stealing kisses. So I had taken a long, hot shower when I got home, then cranked the thermostat down before crawling into bed. I didn't pretend to understand why, but in my darker moments, cold brought me a kind of clarity. Not exactly refreshing, but necessary. And it was cold. Far too cold now, facing coffee and the start of the day, standing in the wreckage of my last broken dream. As a rule, I never remembered my dreams, and even when I did, I gave them no significance, so it floating above the perfectly cramped workspace. My hand, in perfect unison with that other hand, raised and plunged for the perfect cut. I had read many books, maybe because I would never truly be human. Humans fascinated me. I knew all the symbolism. Floating is a kind of flying, sexual, and a knife. Ja, Herr Doktor. The knife ist eine Mother. Ja? Enough, Dexter. It was just a stupid, meaningless dream. The phone rang, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. How do you feel about breakfast at Wolfie's? Deborah said. My treat. It's Saturday morning, I said. We'll never get a seat. I'll go early and grab us a table, she said. Meet you there. Wolfie's Deli on Miami Beach was a Miami institution. Since the Morgans were a Miami family, we ate there on special occasions. Why Deborah thought today was a special occasion was beyond me, but I was sure she'd tell me soon enough. So I showered, dressed in my most casual Saturday style, and drove over. Traffic was light over the newly refurbished MacArthur Causeway, and before long, I was weaving politely through the crowds at Wolfie's. True to her word, Deborah had snagged a table in the corner. She was chatting with a longtime waitress, one even I recognized. Hello, dear Rose, I said, leaning in to kiss the wrinkled cheek. She glared at me in her usual way. My wild Irish rose, I said. Dexter, she said in a high, gravelly voice with a heavy Eastern European accent. Swooning over kisses like a fagala. Fagala? Is that Irish for fiancé? I asked, sitting down. Fe, she said, turning away toward the kitchen with a shake of her head. I think she likes me, I said to Deborah. Somebody should, Deb said. How was your date last night? Lovely, I said. You should try it sometime. Fe, Deborah said. You can't spend every night standing in lingerie by Tamiami Trail, Deb. You need a life. I need a transfer, she snapped. To Homicide. Then we'll talk about life. I understand, I said. Sure, the kids would love to brag their mom works homicide. For God's sake, Dexter, she said. It's a natural thought, Deborah. Nephews and nieces. Little Morgans. Why not? She sighed. I thought Mom was dead, she said. I'm channeling her, I said, through a Danish with cherry jam. Switch the channel. Do you know anything about cellular crystallization? I blinked. Wow, I said. You just shattered the record for most abrupt subject change. I'm serious, she said. Then I'm really worried, I said. What are you talking about? Cellular crystallization. From cold, she said. Cells crystallize when exposed to cold. A light went on in my head. Of course, I said, brilliant. And somewhere deep inside, little bells of realization began to ring. Cold. The clean, pure cold. The blade sizzling almost as it cut into warm flesh. The sterile, desperate slowness of blood. The rightness, the necessity, the cold. Why didn't I think of it before? I began, and then I saw Deborah's face. What, Deb asked. What's so of course? I shook my head. First tell me why you want to know. She stared at me for a long moment, then let out a heavy sigh again. I think you already know, she finally said. There's been another murder. I know, I said. I passed the scene last night. I heard you didn't just pass by. I shrugged. Metro Dade really was a small family. So what did that of course mean? Nothing, I said, feeling a little annoyed. The flesh just looked a bit different, like it had gone through some kind of freezing. I spread my hands. That's all, okay? How cold was it? Like frozen meat, she said. Why would he do that? Because it was beautiful, I thought silently. It slows down the blood flow, I said. She studied me carefully. Does that matter? I took a deep breath, maybe a little shaky. Not because I couldn't explain it. If I even tried, Deb would probably have me locked up. It's critical, I said, feeling oddly unsettled. Why is it critical? I don't know. I think he's doing something with the blood, Deb. It's just a feeling I have from, I don't know, no evidence. You know that. She gave me that cop look again. I tried to think of something to say, but nothing came out. Dexter, the silver-tongued, was suddenly dry-mouthed and mute. Damn it, she finally said. So that's it? Slowing the blood flow is critical? Come on. What the hell is the big deal, Dexter? I'm never very good before my morning coffee, Deborah, I said, making a valiant effort to sound calm. Only accurate. God damn it, she muttered. Again. Rose brought our coffee. Deborah took a long sip. Last night, she said, I got invited to the 72-hour status meeting. I clapped my hands. Excellent. You've arrived. So what do you need me for? Metro Dade had a policy. About 72 hours after a homicide, the team would meet with the lead detective, the chief medical examiner, and sometimes someone from the prosecutor's office to get everyone aligned. If Deborah was being invited to attend, it meant she was officially inside the investigation. She scowled. I'm not very good at playing the game, Dexter. I can feel LaGuerta trying to push me out, but I can't stop it. She's still chasing her mysterious witness? Deborah nodded. Really? Even after last night's murder? She says it proves her theory, because the cuts this time were all completed. But they were different, I protested. She shrugged. And you suggested something? Deb looked away. I told her that hunting for a witness was a waste of time. It's obvious the killer wasn't interrupted. He just wasn't satisfied. Wow, I said. You really have no grasp of office politics. Yeah, well, god damn it, Dex, she said. The two ladies at the next table looked over. Deborah didn't even notice. What you said makes perfect sense. It's so obvious, and she completely blew me off. Even worse. What could be worse than getting blown off? I asked. She blushed. Afterward, I overheard two uniforms laughing at me. Apparently, there's a new nickname going around. For me. She bit her lip and looked away. Einstein, she said. I'm afraid I don't get it. If my boobs were my brain, I'd be Einstein, she said bitterly. I cleared my throat instead of laughing. That's what she's pushing about me, Deb said. Little jokes, little insults, it sticks. Then people think no one takes you seriously, so they won't promote you. God damn it, Dex, she's ruining my... I felt a wave of protective fury rising. She's an idiot. Should I tell her that, Dex? Would that be smart politics? Our food arrived. Rose slammed the plates down like she'd been sentenced by a corrupt judge to serve breakfast to child murderers. I gave her my biggest smile, and she walked off muttering to herself. I took a bite and turned my thoughts back to Deborah's problem. I tried to think about it that way. Deborah's problem, not those admirable murders, not the fascinating, gorgeous craftsmanship of the killer, not something exactly like what I'd love to do someday. I needed to keep my distance, but this was pressing against me, harder than ever. Even in last night's dream, with its eerie coldness. Coincidence, of course, but still deeply unsettling. This killer had tapped into the very core of what I aspired to in my own acts of murder. In his method, of course, not in his choice of victims. He needed to be stopped, certainly. No question about that. Those poor street girls. And yet, the necessity of the cold. It was intriguing enough to consider experimenting with someday. Finding some dark, tight, beautifully confined place. Tight? Where did that come from? From my dream, of course. But that only meant the subconscious wanted me to think about it, didn't it? And tight somehow made sense in a strange way. Cold and tight, refrigerated truck, I said. I opened my eyes. Deborah was fiercely wrestling with a mouthful of scrambled eggs before she could speak. What? Oh, just a guess. I'm afraid it's not a true insight. But doesn't it kind of make sense? What kind of sense? Deb asked. I looked down at my plate and frowned, trying to picture how the process would work. He wants a cold space to slow the flow of blood, and because it's, cleaner that way. Possibly. I mean it, and it has to be tight. Why? Where the hell did that idea come from? Tight? I chose to pretend I didn't hear that question. So a refrigerated truck would match those conditions, and it's mobile, which makes disposal afterward much easier. Deborah took a bite of her croissant and chewed thoughtfully for a moment. So, she finally said, swallowing the bite, the killer might have access to a truck like that? Or maybe he owns one? Possibly. Except last night was the first time there's been any sign of cold. Deborah frowned. So he just went out and got a refrigerated truck? Unlikely. It's still an experiment. Most likely just an impulse. Something that drove him to try working with the cold. My sister nodded. And we're not gonna be lucky enough that he drives one of those for a living or anything, are we? I gave her my happy little shark smile. Ah, Deb, you're really sharp this morning. No, I'm afraid our friend is too smart to tie himself to something like that. Deborah sipped her coffee, set the cup down, and leaned forward. So we need to look for a stolen refrigerated truck, she said at last. I'm afraid so, I said. But how many of those could there be in the last 48 hours? In Miami? She snorted. Someone steals one. Word gets around it's worth stealing, and suddenly every low-rent thug, illegal immigrant, junkie, and punk-ass kid has to jack one just to keep up their rep. Let's hope no one started that rumor, I said. Deborah finished her croissant. I'll check, she said. Then she leaned across the table and grabbed my hand. "I really appreciate this," she said, offering me a brief, awkward smile, hesitating for a beat. "But I worry about how you figured it out, Dex. It's just that She looked down at the table and squeezed my hand again. I squeezed back. "Leave the worrying to me," I said. "You just find that truck." Chapter 8. In theory, the 72-hour meeting at the police department allows everyone enough time to make certain progress on a case, but still early enough that leads remain hot. So on Monday morning, in a conference room on the second floor, the crime-fighting squad, under the indomitable Detective LaGuerta, was once again assembled for the 72-hour briefing. I was present with them. I got a few glances, some genuine recognition from the cops who knew me. Just some simple jokes, like, "Hey, blood guy, where's your mop?" Rare, decent people. Deborah would be one of them soon. I felt proud and oddly humble to be in that room. Unfortunately, not everyone in the room shared that attitude. "What the hell are you doing here?" Sergeant Dokes growled. He was a large black man with a perennially pissed-off expression and permanent hostility. He carried his own cold, vicious aura, a trait that would be very helpful for someone with hobbies like mine. A shame we couldn't be friends. For some reason, he hated all lab rats. And for an additional, more specific reason, that rat was always me. He also held the Metro-Dade Police Department's bench press record. So yeah, he was allergic to my polite smile. "Just here to listen in, Sergeant," I told him. "No one called your starry ass to be here," he said. "You need to get out." "He can stay, Sergeant," said LaGuerta. Dokes glared at her. "Stay for what damn reason?" "I don't want to ruin anyone's fun," I said, pretending to stand and head for the door with no real intention of leaving. "It's totally fine." LaGuerta flashed me a PR smile, then turned back to Dokes. "He can stay," she repeated. "He gives me the creeps," Dokes muttered. I was beginning to appreciate his subtle instincts. Of course I gave him the creeps. The real question was why he was the only one in a room full of cops who sensed it. "Let's begin," said LaGuerta, smoothly asserting her command. Dokes slumped into his chair, tossing one last glare at me. The first part of the meeting was the usual protocol. Reports, small talk, and all the trivial humanizing details for those who actually belonged to humanity. LaGuerta gave PR instructions on what could and couldn't be shared with the press, including a shiny new photo of herself she had conveniently prepared for this occasion. Serious, yet attractive, fierce, but refined. You could practically see her becoming a lieutenant in that photo. If only Deborah had a bit of that PR finesse. It took nearly an hour before we actually addressed the murders. At last, LaGuerta asked for updates on her mysterious witness search. No one had anything. I did my best to appear surprised. LaGuerta frowned at the room with a commanding stare. "Come on, people," she said. "Someone needs to find something." But no one had. The silence that followed was awkward. People stared at fingernails, the floor, the ceiling tiles. Deborah cleared her throat. She began, then cleared her throat again. I have, an idea, a different idea, about trying a slightly different angle. She spoke like she was quoting someone, which she was. All my careful coaching still hadn't helped her sound natural. But at least she stuck to the words I helped her choose. LaGuerta raised a perfectly manicured eyebrow. An idea? Really? She put on a face that suggested surprise and delight. Well, please, do share it with us, Officer Officer Morgan. Doak snorted. What a charming man. Deb turned bright red, but pressed on. It's a cell crystallization on the latest victim. I want to check for any stolen refrigerated trucks reported missing in the past week. Silence. Heavy, total silence. The silence of a herd of cows. They didn't get it. None of them. Deb hadn't managed to convey it. She let the silence hang, while LaGuerta helped it fester with a picture-perfect frown, a confused glance around the room to see if anyone else was reacting, and then a polite look at Deb. Refrigerated trucks? LaGuerta said. Deb looked totally lost. Poor girl. Public speaking was not her thing. Yes, she said. LaGuerta let the words dangle, savoring them. She hummed. Deb's face darkened. Not a good sign. I cleared my throat. When that didn't help, I faked a cough, loud enough to snap her back. She looked at me. So did LaGuerta. Sorry, I said. Think I'm coming down with a cold. What more could anyone ask from a big brother? Cold, Deb blurted, clinging to the lifeline. A refrigerated truck could explain that type of tissue damage. And being mobile makes it harder to trace. Easier to dispose of bodies, too. So, if one was stolen, a refrigerated truck, it might give us a lead. There we go. She was getting traction. A few thoughtful frowns appeared. I could practically hear the gears turning. But LaGuerta only nodded. That's that interesting thought, officer, she said, putting a soft emphasis on officer. A reminder that we were all equal here, except not really. But I still believe our best shot is locating the witness. We know he's out there. She smiled a diplomatic PR smile. Or she added, to show off her sharpness. But someone saw something. We know that from the evidence. So let's stay focused on that direction and leave the guessing to the folks up in Broward. Okay? She paused to let the room chuckle at the J. But, Officer Morgan, I'd really appreciate it if you continued helping us talk to the street girls. They're used to you down there. My God, she was good. She had pulled the plug on any enthusiasm for Deb's idea, shoved her back into her place, and rallied the team behind her again with one smart jab at the rival Broward County. All in just a few sentences. I wanted to applaud, except, of course, I was rooting for poor Deborah, who was now deflated. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed again. I watched the muscles in her jaw clench as she forced her face into a neutral cop expression. A decent performance on its own, but nothing compared to LaGuardia's. The rest of the meeting offered little of note. Nothing else was said that hadn't already been said. So a short time after LaGuardia's grand finale, the meeting adjourned, and we found ourselves back in the main hall. "Damn her," Deborah muttered. "That woman. Unbelievable. Just unbelievable." "And no argument here," I agreed. She glanced at me. "Thanks, big brother. You were actually helpful." I raised an eyebrow. "But we agreed I'd stay out of this so you could earn the credit." She groaned. "Some credit. She made me look like a total fool." "With all due respect, my dear sister, you got in her way." Deborah looked at me, then away, then threw up her hands. "What am I supposed to say? I'm not even officially on the task force. I'm only there because the captain insisted." "And he didn't say they had to listen to you," I said. "They didn't listen, and they won't," she said bitterly. "Instead of getting into homicide, this case is going to bury my career. I'm going to waste away writing parking tickets. Dexter." "There's a way out, Deb," I said, and the look she gave me this time held at least a flicker of hope. "What is it?" she asked. I smiled. A reassuring, challengingly real man, but definitely not a shark, smile. "Find the truck," I said. It was 3 full days before I heard from my foster sister again. The longest she could usually go without talking to me. She came to my office right after Thursday lunch, looking worn out. "I found it," she said, and I had no idea what she meant. "Found what, Deb?" I asked. "The fountain of sulking youth?" "The truck," she said. "The refrigerated truck." "Well, that's fantastic news," I said. "Then why do you look like you're ready to punch someone?" "Because I am," she snapped, then tossed 4 or 5 stapled pages onto my desk. "Take a look." I picked them up and glanced at the top sheet. "Oh," I murmured. "How many?" 23, she said. "In the past month, 23 refrigerated trucks have been reported missing. The traffic division says most of them are found dumped in canals. Insurance fraud. Nobody really bothers to look too hard. So of course, nobody's assigned to follow up on cases like this. There's no one." "Welcome to Miami," I said. Deborah sighed, took the papers back, and slumped into my spare chair like she'd just lost all her bones. "I can't check them all. Not alone. It would take months." "Damn it, Dex," she blurted. "Now what the hell do we do?" I shook my head. "I'm sorry, Deb," I said. "But now, we wait." "Wait? That's it? Just wait?" "That's right," I said. And that's exactly what we did. For the next 2 weeks, we waited. And then. Chapter 9. In theory, the 72-hour meeting at the police department allowed everyone enough time to make some progress on a case, but still early enough for leads to remain hot. So, on Monday morning, in a meeting room on the 2nd floor, the elite crime-fighting team, under the indomitable direction of Detective LaGuardia, was assembled once more for the 72-hour review. I was there too. I received a few nods, a bit of genuine acknowledgement from officers who knew me. Just simple jokes, like, "Hey, blood guy, where's your mop?" Rare decent folks. Soon my Deborah would be one of them. I felt proud and humbled to be in the same room. Unfortunately, not everyone shared that attitude. "What the hell are you doing here?" Sergeant Dokes growled. He was a big black guy who always looked like someone had just insulted him, permanently pissed off. He had a cool, fierce intensity that, admittedly, would be useful for someone with my hobbies. It was a shame we couldn't be friends. But for some reason, he hated all lab rats. And for an extra special reason, that lab rat was always Dexter. He also held the Metro Dade bench press record. So naturally, my polite smile annoyed him. "I'm just sitting in to listen, Sergeant," I said to him. "You didn't get any goddamn invite to be here," he snapped. "You should leave." "He can stay, Sergeant," LaGuerta interjected. Dokes glared at her. "To do what, exactly?" "I don't want to spoil the party," I said, pretending to get up while having zero intention of actually leaving. "No problem at all." LaGuerta flashed me a professional smile, then turned to Dokes. "He can stay," she repeated. "He gives me the creeps," Dokes muttered. I began to appreciate his finer qualities. Of course I gave him the creeps. The real question was why he was the only one in a room full of cops with the instincts to feel it. "Let's get started," LaGuerta said, her voice calm but firm, clearly in charge. Dokes slumped into his chair, throwing me one last dirty look. The first part of the meeting was the usual procedure. Reports, pleasantries, all the little details that make us human, at least for those who actually are. LaGuerta gave the media liaisons their talking points, what they could and couldn't share with the press. This included a newly polished headshot of LaGuerta herself, prepared especially for the occasion. It was stern but appealing, intense yet tasteful. You could almost see her being promoted to lieutenant in that photo. If only Deborah understood the value of self-promotion like that. It took nearly an hour before we finally got to the actual murders. But eventually, LaGuerta asked for updates on her beloved hunt for the mysterious witness. No one had anything to report. I did my best to look surprised. LaGuerta frowned at the group, clearly displeased. "Come on, people," she said. "Somebody here has to have found something." But nobody had. Silence followed. Members of the team studied their fingernails, the floor, the acoustic tiles overhead. Deborah cleared her throat. My sister began, then cleared her throat again. "I have, an idea, a different angle, about trying to search from a slightly different direction." She sounded like she was quoting someone, and of course, she was. All my careful coaching hadn't made her sound natural, but at least she clung to the words I'd picked out for political survival. LaGuerta raised one expertly penciled eyebrow. "An idea? Really?" She donned a face perfectly suited to express both surprise and delight. "Well, by all means, do share it with us, Officer Morgan, I mean." Dokes chuckled. What a lovely man. Deborah turned bright red, but pushed on. "It's, cell crystallization on the most recent victim. I'd like to check if any refrigerated trucks have been reported stolen in the past week." Silence. Heavy, complete silence. The silence of cows in a pasture. They didn't get it. None of those blockheads did, and Deborah couldn't make them see. She let the silence linger, one LaGuerta nurtured with a well-practiced frown. a politely confused glance around the room, and finally a delicate nod toward Deborah. "A refrigerated truck?" LaGuerta said. Deborah looked completely flustered. Poor kid. She was not the kind of girl who liked speaking in front of a crowd. "Yes," my sister said. LaGuerta let the word dangle in the air, savoring it. She murmured. Deborah's face darkened. Not a good sign. I cleared my throat, and when that didn't help, I gave a louder cough. Just enough to remind my sister to stay calm. She looked at me. So did LaGuerta. "Sorry," I said. "I think I'm coming down with something. I mean, really, could anyone ask for a better big brother?" Cold," Deborah blurted out, seizing on the thread I'd thrown her. "A refrigerated truck very well could have caused that kind of tissue damage. And it's mobile, which would make it harder to trace. Getting rid of the body would also be much easier. So, if there was one reported stolen, I mean, a refrigerated truck, that might give us a lead." There it was. She'd done it. Finally grabbed their attention. A couple of thoughtful frowns popped up around the room. I could practically hear the gears starting to turn. But LaGuerta merely nodded. "That's a very interesting thought, officer," she said, adding just enough weight to the word officer to remind us all this was a democracy where anyone could speak, technically. But I still believe our best chance is finding the witness. We know he's out there. She smiled, a restrained, politically skilled smile. Or she is, she added, to show that she could be sharp when needed. But someone saw something. We know that from the evidence. So let's keep our focus on that and leave the guessing games to the folks over in Broward, shall we? She paused, long enough for a polite wave of chuckles to ripple through the room. "But Officer Morgan, I would greatly appreciate it if you'd continue speaking with the street god." She was good. In just a few short lines, she pulled the rug out from under anyone thinking of entertaining Deb's idea, shoved Deb back into her old role, and won the investigative team back to her side with a joke about our rivalry with Broward County. It made me want to applaud. Except, of course, I was standing with poor Deborah, my sister, who had just been deflated like a balloon. She opened her mouth, held it there for a beat, then closed it again. I watched her jaw clench as she carefully shifted her face into a neutral police expression. Not bad, really. Not up to LaGuerta's level, but not bad. The rest of the meeting passed without anything noteworthy. There truly was nothing more to say. So not long after LaGuerta's expert finale, the meeting adjourned and we found ourselves out in the lobby again. "God damn her," Deborah muttered. "Fucking bitch. Fucking bitch. Fucking bitch." No argument here. I agreed. She glanced at me. "Thanks, big brother. You were really helpful." I raised an eyebrow, but we agreed I'd stay out of this so you could earn the credit. She growled. "Some credit. She made me look like an idiot." "With all due respect, my dear sister, you got in her way." Deborah looked at me, then away, then threw up her hands. "So what am I supposed to say? I'm not even on the damn task force. I'm only there because the captain insisted they include me. And he didn't say they had to listen to you, I said. They didn't listen. And they won't, Deborah said bitterly. Instead of getting me into homicide, this case is going to kill my career. I'm going to rot writing parking tickets, Dexter. There's a way out, Deb, I said. And the look she gave me now held maybe a third of hope. What is it? She asked. I smiled, the kind of reassuring, confident smile that said, I'm not really a shark, I promise. Find the truck, I said. It was 3 days before I heard from my foster sister again. The longest she could go without talking to me. She showed up at my office just after Thursday lunch, looking downcast. I found it, she said, and I didn't understand what she meant. Found what, Deb? I asked. The fountain of eternal sass? The truck, she said. The refrigerated truck. Well, that's terrific news, I said. So why do you look like you're about to punch someone? Because I am, she snapped, and then tossed 4 or 5 stapled sheets of paper onto my desk. Take a look. I picked them up and glanced at the top page. Oh, I said, surprised. How many total? 23, she said. In the last month, 23 refrigerated trucks have been reported stolen. The traffic guys say most of them ended up in canals, dumped for insurance money. No one really bothers to track them down. So, nobody's actually assigned to investigate those cases. Nobody. Welcome to Miami, I said. Deborah sighed, took the pages back from me, and flopped into my spare chair, like her bones had dissolved. There's no way I can check all of them, especially not alone. It'll take months. God damn it, Dex, she groaned. So what the hell do we do now? I shook my head. I'm sorry, Deb, I said. But now we just have to wait. Wait? That's it? Just wait? That's it, I said. And that's exactly what we did for the next 2 weeks. We waited. And then, Chapter 10. A little after 8 in the morning, La Guerta showed up where I was sitting, on the trunk of my car. She leaned her perfectly shaped hip against the vehicle and edged closer until our thighs were touching. I waited for her to say something, but she didn't seem to have anything to say at the moment. Neither did I. So I just sat there for a few minutes, looking back toward the bridge, feeling the warmth from her leg pressed against mine, and wondering where my shy little friend had gone off to with his truck. But I was jolted out of that pleasant daytime reverie by the pressure on my thigh. I looked down at my pants. La Guerta was gripping my thigh like it was a lump of kneaded dough. I looked up at her face. She looked back. They found the body, she said. You know, the rest of the head's owner. I stood up. Where? She gave me a look, like a cop watching someone who just found a disembodied head on the street. But she still... Where the Panthers play? I asked, feeling a sharp chill creep through me. On the ice? La Guerta nodded, still watching me. The hockey team, she said. Isn't that what they're called? The Panthers? I think that's what people call them, I said. I couldn't help myself. She pursed her lips. They found it stuffed into the goal net. Home side or visitor side? I asked. She blinked. What difference does that make? I shook my head. Just kidding, detective. Because I don't even know how to describe the difference. I need someone who actually knows hockey to go over there, she said. Finally, her eyes drifted away from me, scanning the crowd for someone clutching a hockey puck. I'm glad you can joke about it, she added. One of those, what was it? Samboli? A what? She shrugged. Some kind of machine. They use it on the ice, don't they? A Zamboni? Whatever. The guy who drives it, he brought it out on the ice this morning. Some players wanted to get in some early practice, I guess. They wanted fresh ice. So this guy, the operator, she hesitated, of the Samboli, he usually shows up early on practice days. So he drove it out there, and he saw these bundles piled up. Down at the end of the rink, in the goal net, I think. So he got down to take a closer look. She shrugged again. Dokes is there now. He said they can't get the guy calm enough to say much yet. I know a little about hockey, I said. She looked at me again with eyes that felt heavy. There's a lot I don't know about you, Dexter. Do you play hockey? No, I've never played, I replied modestly. I've been to a few games. She said nothing, and I had to bite my tongue to keep from babbling. The truth is, Rita has season tickets to the Florida Panthers. And I was quite surprised to find out I actually enjoyed hockey. Not just because of the furious, joyous brawls that rivaled any murder spree, but also something about sitting in that vast, chilled arena that made me feel incredibly relaxed. I'd have gone just to watch golf if it were played there. Honestly, I would have said anything if it meant LaGuerta would take me to the scene. I really wanted to get to that ice rink. I wanted to see the body shoved into the net more than I wanted anything else I could think of. I wanted to unwrap those neat, clean bundles and see the dry, bloodless meat inside. I wanted it so much, it was like a cartoon hound on a scent trail. I wanted to be there so badly. It felt like I had a rightful claim to that corpse. All right, LaGuerta finally said, just when I was about to jump out of my own skin. She flashed a strange, fleeting smile. Partly polite, but partly, what? Something entirely different, thoroughly human. And unfortunately, that meant it was entirely beyond my grasp. Let's give ourselves a chance to talk. I'd like that very much, I said, radiating charm with every syllable. LaGuerta didn't respond. Maybe she didn't hear me. Not that it mattered. She was entirely incapable of detecting sarcasm aimed at her own image. You could heap the most grotesque flattery on her, and she'd accept it as perfectly appropriate and well-deserved. I didn't actually enjoy flattering her. There was no fun in it without the challenge. But I didn't know what else to say. What did she imagine we would talk about anyway? She had already grilled me mercilessly the moment she showed up on the scene. We had stood beside my poor, dented car, watching the sun climb higher. She'd looked out toward the overpass and asked me 7 times if I had seen the face of the truck driver. Each time with a slightly different tone and always frowning between questions. She'd asked 5 times if I was sure It was a refrigerated truck. I was quite certain she was carefully baiting a trap. She clearly wanted to ask more about the truck, but was restraining herself from appearing too obvious. At one point, she even forgot herself and asked me in Spanish. I told her I was completely seguro, and she stared at me and touched my arm, but didn't repeat the question. She looked up at the arched bridge 3 times, shook her head, and muttered "puta" under her breath. Of course, that was a not-so-subtle jab at Officer Puta, my dear sister Deborah, now that she had to face an actual refrigerated truck, exactly as Deborah had predicted. She needed to rebalance her footing. And judging by the way LaGuerta was biting her lower lip, I could tell she was racking her brain for a strategy. I was sure she'd come up with something nasty for Deb. That was her specialty. But I hoped this might at least earn a small amount of credit for my sister. Not from LaGuerta, of course, but maybe someone else would recognize Deb's insightful little detective hunch as correct. Oddly enough, LaGuerta hadn't asked why I happened to be driving around at that hour. Of course, I wasn't a detective, but it seemed like one more obvious question. It wouldn't be very charitable to say that sort of oversight was typical of her, but it was. She simply didn't ask. Still, it seemed we had more to talk about. So I followed her to her car, a large, 2-year-old light blue Chevrolet she drove for work. Off the clock, she had a little BMW no one was supposed to know about. "Get in," she said, and I climbed into the clean blue front seat. LaGuerta drove quickly, weaving through traffic. Within a few minutes, we had crossed the overpass back toward Miami, zipped across Biscayne Boulevard, and drove another half-mile to reach State Road 595. She took the highway north, dodging cars at a speed a little too fast, even for Miami standards. But we reached 595 and turned west again. She glanced over at me 3 times before speaking. "That's a nice shirt," she said. I looked down at the snazzy shirt I'd thrown on in my rush out the door. It was a polyester bowling-style shirt with bright red dragons on it. I'd worn it all day at work, and it was a bit wrinkled by now. But yes, it still looked fairly decent. It could be considered nice, I suppose, but still, was LaGuerta making small talk to relax me? To catch me off guard, hoping I'd let something incriminating slip? Was she suspicious that I knew more than I was letting on and trying to lull me into dropping a hint? "You always dress well, Dexter," she said. She gave me a rather goofy smile, not even noticing she was about to slam into a tanker truck. She looked back just in time, and with one finger, deftly steered us around it, continuing west on State Road 595. I thought about the nice clothes I always wore. Oh yes, of course I did. I was proud to be the best-dressed monster in Dade County. Sure, he might have chopped poor Mr. Duarte into pieces, but my, what a snappy dresser he was. Proper attire for every occasion, and incidentally, what does one wear to an early morning decapitation? A day-old bowling-style shirt and slacks, naturally. I was dressed fashionably, but aside from the slightly rushed outfit I threw on this morning, I was actually very careful. It was one of Harry's lessons: always be neat, well-dressed, avoid drawing attention. But why would a calculated homicide detective even notice or care about that? It didn't seem likely, or did it? A tiny, terrible thought began to grow. Something about that strange little smile on her face, before it vanished, had given me the answer. Ridiculous. But what else could it be? LaGuerta wasn't trying to throw me off balance, to ask more probing questions about what I'd seen. She didn't actually care about my knowledge of hockey. LaGuerta was being friendly. She liked me. I was still reeling from the bizarre, shaky, mushy attack I'd made on Ouida. And now this. LaGuerta liked me? Had terrorists dumped something in Miami's water supply? Was I releasing some kind of weird pheromone? Had every woman in Miami suddenly realized how boring real men were and started finding my deficiencies attractive? Seriously, what the hell was going on? Of course, I could be wrong. I clung to that idea like a barracuda lunging at a shiny silver spoon. After all, it would be a huge leap of egotism to think that a stylish, complex, career-driven woman like LaGuerta would show any interest. Wouldn't it be far more likely that what? As annoying as the possibility was, it made a certain amount of sense. We worked the same kind of job, and so, as the standard cop wisdom goes, we'd be more likely to understand and forgive each other. Our relationship could survive the hours and pressure of cop life. And though I wasn't overly full of myself, I wasn't terrible either. I knew how to be appealing, as we natives like to say. I'd been working at being attractive to her for a couple of years now. It had all been just social babble, but there was no reason to think she knew that. I was good at being appealing. It was one of my few shallow pleasures. I'd studied it deeply, practiced it extensively, and by the time I slipped into the role, no one could tell I was faking. I was really good at scattering the seeds of charm. Maybe, naturally, some of those seeds had finally sprouted. ... But sprouted into this. What now? Was she about to suggest a quiet dinner one evening? Or a few sweaty hours at the Calseek Motel? Luckily, we arrived at the arena before the full panic attack kicked in. LaGuerta circled the building looking for an entrance. It wasn't hard to find. A cluster of police cars was parked outside a pair of double doors. She pulled her car in and wedged it between them. I scrambled out of the car before she could put a hand on my knee. She climbed out and looked at me for a moment. Her mouth twitched slightly. "I'm just going to take a look," I said. Then I hurried into the arena. Yes, I was fleeing from LaGuerta, but I was also eager to get inside, to see what my clever friend had done, to examine his work up close, to marvel at it, to learn. Inside echoed with the familiar organized chaos of any crime scene. But to me, there was a particular current humming through the air, a sense of restrained excitement and tension that you wouldn't find at an ordinary murder scene. A feeling that reminded you something about this one was different. Something new, perhaps even miraculous, might unfold. because he and I were here, both vying for the top spot. Or maybe it was just me. A group of people stood near the goal net. A few wore Broward County police uniforms, arms crossed, watching as Captain Matthews argued about jurisdiction with a man in a perfectly tailored suit. As I got closer, I spotted Angel No Relation, standing in an awkward position beside a bald man, kneeling with one knee down, poking at a stack of carefully wrapped packages. I stopped beside the rink's barrier to look through the glass. There it was, just 10 feet away. It looked absolutely perfect in the pure, icy stillness of the freshly smoothed ice, courtesy of the Zamboni. Any jeweler would tell you that finding the right arrangement is everything. And this scene was stunning. Absolute perfection. I felt slightly faint, unsure whether the rail could support my weight, as if I might simply glide through the hard wood like a vapor. Even from behind the barrier, I could tell. He'd taken all the time he needed. He had done exactly what he intended, despite what could have been a harrowing close call on the causeway just minutes before. Or somehow, had he known I meant him no harm, because no matter what, I was going to drag him into the light. Did I really mean him no harm? Was I truly planning to follow his trail to the end, trembling with anticipation, just to help Deborah climb the career ladder? Of course, that's what I thought I was doing. But would I be strong enough to follow through if it kept being this fascinating? Right now, we were standing in a hockey arena where I'd spent many thoughtful, build-up, enjoyable hours. Wasn't this proof that the artist, pardon me, I meant the killer, was following a path parallel to mine? Just look at the beautiful work he'd done here. And the head, that was the key. Of course, it was too significant a piece of what he was doing to simply be left behind. Did he throw it out to rattle me? To push me into spasms of horror, revulsion, and dread? Or did he somehow know that I felt the same way he did? Could it be he also sensed the connection between us and simply wanted to tease me with it? Was he playing with me? He must have had a very good reason to leave me a gift like that. I was feeling so much. How could he not? LaGuerta came up beside me. "You were in quite a hurry," she said, a hint of complaint in her voice. "Afraid she might run off?" She nodded toward the bundled body parts. I knew somewhere inside me was a witty comeback, something to make her smile, charm her a little more, smooth over the awkwardness of my clumsy getaway to escape her grasp. But standing here at the barrier, looking down at the body on the ice, lying there in the net, in the presence of greatness, one might say, no clever idea came. I restrained myself from yelling at her to shut up, but it was a near thing. I needed to see it for myself, I said honestly, then composed myself enough to add, "That's the home team's goal." She smacked my arm playfully. "You're terrible," she said. Thankfully, Sergeant Dokes came over before she could launch into a fit of flirty giggles, something I really couldn't handle. As always, Dokes seemed more interested in figuring out how to rip open my ribs than anything else. He greeted me with a smile so razor sharp, it nearly sliced off my ear. I slipped away, leaving him with LaGuerta. He glared after me, watching with an expression that said he knew I was guilty of something, and he'd be happy to eviscerate me to find out what. I was sure he'd be a lot happier somewhere police were allowed to occasionally break a leg or two. I veered around him, taking a slow lap along the barrier toward the nearest entrance to the rink. Just as I found a gap in the boards, something slammed into my side from an angle I couldn't see. I straightened up to face my attacker, sporting a fresh bruise and a forced smile. "Hello, dear sister," I said. So good to see a familiar face. "You bastard!" she hissed at me. "Very possibly," I replied. "But why bring it up now?" "Because you're a goddamn bastard, and you had a lead and didn't call me." "A lead?" I stammered. "What makes you think—" "Don't play games, Dexter," Deborah growled. "You were cruising around at 4 in the morning, and it wasn't for hookers. You knew where he was, goddammit." A light went on. I had been so distracted by my own troubles, first with the dream, and the fact that obviously it was something more than a dream, and then the nightmare encounter with LaGuerta. I hadn't thought about how I'd wronged Deborah. I hadn't shared. Of course she'd be mad. "It wasn't a lead, Deb," I said, trying to calm her a little. "It wasn't anything certain. Just a feeling, a thought. Really nothing at all." She shoved me again. "Except it really was something," she snapped. "You found him." "Actually, I'm not sure," I said. "I think he found me." "Stop trying to be clever," Deb said, and I held out my hands to show just how unlikely that was. "You promised for sake." I didn't recall making any promise that included middle-of-the-night calls to share my dreams, but that didn't seem wise to say aloud, so I let it go. "I'm sorry, Deb," I offered. "I really didn't think it would lead to anything. It was just a hunch, that's all. Naturally, I wouldn't be trying to explain any of the psychic aspects here, not even to Deb, especially not to her." But another thought came to me. I lowered my voice. "You might be able to help me, actually. What should I say if someone eventually asks what I was doing, driving around here at 4 a.m.? "LaGuerta didn't ask you?" she said. "Not in detail," I said, trying to suppress a shrug. Deb made a face. "And she didn't press you?" It wasn't a question. "I guess the detective had a lot on her mind," I said. I didn't add that apparently part of that included me. But someone will ask, eventually. I glanced over to where LaGuerta was overseeing the investigation. "Most likely Sergeant Dokes," I said, with genuine unease. My sister nodded. "He's a good cop, if he'd cut the attitude." "Maybe that is all he is," I said. "But for some reason, he doesn't like me. He'll ask anything he thinks might pin me to the wall." "So tell him the truth," Deborah said flatly. "But tell me first." She jabbed me again, in the exact same spot. "Come on, Deb," I said. "You know how easily I bruise." "I didn't," she said, "but I think I'm starting to learn." "It won't happen again," I promised. "Just a burst of 3 a.m. excitement, Deborah." What would you have said if I'd called to tell you and it turned out to be nothing? But it didn't. It turned out to be something, Deb said, jabbing again. I honestly didn't think it would. I'd have felt pretty stupid dragging you into it. Imagine how I'd feel if he killed you, she said. I was genuinely surprised. I hadn't even begun to consider how she'd feel. Regret? Disappointment? Anger? That kind of speculation was out of my range. So I repeated, I'm sorry, Deb. And because I'm the kind of upbeat guy who always finds a silver lining, I added, but at least the refrigerated truck was there. She blinked at me. The truck was there? She asked. Oh, Deb, I said. They didn't tell you? She gave me a punch even harder, in the same bruised spot. God damn it, Dexter, she hissed. What about the truck? It was there, Deb, I said, slightly confused by her reaction, and of course, slightly disoriented by being beaten up by a very pretty woman. He was driving a refrigerated truck when he dumped the head. She clutched my arm and stared. You're lying, she finally said. I'm not. Jesus, she breathed, staring off into space, no doubt seeing her career advancement float gloriously above my head. I'm sure she would have continued, but at that moment, Angel No Relation spoke up, his voice cutting through the ambient echoes of the arena. Detective, he called, his eyes flicking toward LaGuerta. It was a strange sound, half shock, half triumph, from a man who'd never raised his voice in public. And it held something that brought the entire building to sudden silence. His voice said, I've found something important, but oh, dear God. All eyes turned to Angel, and he nodded toward the bald man kneeling and gingerly unwrapping something from the topmost body bundle. At last, the man pulled it free, fumbled, and let it slip, sliding across the ice. He lunged after it and lost his balance, skidding after the shiny object until both of them hit the boards and stopped. With a shaking hand, Angel picked up the item, held it aloft for us all to see. The silence that followed was reverent, breathless, beautiful, like thunderous applause when a masterpiece is unveiled. It was the rearview mirror from the truck. ...